Thank you, everyone. Good evening. I'm Mayor Stewart, and I'd like to state that all of the council members are present. And Vice Mayor Marks, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you so much. Well, before we get started, I feel like recently we've had some really challenging news in almost every meeting. And tonight, we are dedicating this meeting to Keith Dunlop. He was an advisory body committee member for two of our advisory bodies, the Personnel Board in March of 2019, and just the last time we met, January 26th, he was there at the REOC, the Revenue Enhancement Oversight Commission. And I personally sat on the Human Resources Association board and worked with Keith pretty closely, and just wanted to give my colleagues a chance if they wish to say anything and go from there. Councilmember Shoresman?
Yes, thank you. Voice is already getting. Thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you for recognizing Keith. I had the pleasure of meeting Keith about 12 years ago. He and my husband, Jonathan, were both wedding photographers starting to get their businesses going here on the Central Coast, and they bonded immediately just over their own shared experience of photographing weddings and being amazing photographers, both of them. He also had a love for travel, which shared with both my husband and I, and he traveled all over the world taking pretty amazing photos of people. He captured the human experience just beautifully in lots of different places around the world. We became quick and lasting friends, and we've stayed so over the years. And I've really watched him become such an important part of this community. As the mayor said, he sat on multiple advisory committees. He was a part of many chamber groups and Leadership SLO, and he was one of those people that wasn't in the limelight a lot, but he was just kind of a quiet hero behind the scenes doing lots of hard things like REOC that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily gravitate towards, but he did it because he cared about this community, and he cared about doing those hard things that a lot of other people don't want to do. He and I spent a lot of time together, especially in this last year or so. He was the treasurer on my campaign, and we were in constant contact almost daily. And he was a compliance officer by trade, and he kept everything very detailed, always very organized, and he was a good person to always be counted on to ask tough questions and be critical about things, but yet he was always doing it for the best reasons, and I will always remember him for that. He especially loved working on vintage bicycles, which also kind of showed his attention to detail. I almost don't know if he enjoyed putting the bikes together. I think he almost enjoyed doing that more than riding them. And also was very good at helping my husband spend money on on bike gear and outdoor gear. And we were getting ready to go on a backpacking trip this July. And he's a very near and dear person to my heart, and I see him in everything around this city. And I'm just grateful to have had him as a friend. And for those of you who know him, there are quite a few people that feel the same way about him that I do. And there's a celebration of life in the works that we'll be putting together and announcing in the next few days. So keep your eyes open for that. And thank you for letting me talk about my friend for a minute.
Thank you, Councilmember Shoresman. And then just again, from all of the council, we just for all the family and friends, our hearts go out to you. And when we lose someone so abruptly, it's difficult. Thank you. Well, moving on. The city attorney, we have a report out on closed session. Is she on Zoom? I forgot to ask you. Okay, great.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I echo the loss of Keith, who was just such a thoughtful, intelligent public servant and such a pleasure to work with. I'm sorry for our whole community's loss. The council did meet in closed session on one matter of anticipated litigation as noted on the agenda, and took no reportable action, provided litigation direction only, and there was no further action taken.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move forward to our first presentation. So ready for us, thank you, for the Water Resource Recovery Facility Project update, and that is with Utilities Director Aaron Floyd and Utilities Deputy Director of Engineering and Planning, Miguel Barcenas. And we're gonna keep all applause to this. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. It's an honor to be in front of you this evening. It's also an honor for me to be joined by our Deputy Director of Engineering and Planning, Miguel Barcenas. In addition to his myriad of other jobs and duties that Miguel does to continue to provide water and wastewater services through the city, Miguel is also the project manager on your Water Resource Recovery Facility project. So it has really been through Miguel's extreme diligence on this project, his high demonstration of his work ethic, and his expertise in construction in this that we are able to present to you this evening a very successful project underway. With that, Miguel, if you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. Miguel Barcenas, Deputy Director of Engineering and Planning for the Utilities Department. Tonight, we have a brief update in terms of where we're at with the Water Resource Recovery Facility project. We're going to look at where we have been, where we're at, and where we're going. So at the beginning of the project, we created a vision and a mission statement that basically established the guiding principles for the project. And we did that through the filter of looking at the triple bottom line. This looked at economic and social environmental values for the community. And then at the beginning of the construction process, we engaged with all of the stakeholders and rebranded the project as Slow Water Plus, just to be able to engage the whole team and realize of the challenges that were coming ahead of us. So why are we doing this project? Just a little background. Some of the project drivers are regulatory requirements. We also have aging infrastructure that needed to be replaced. And we wanted to maximize the resource recovery with modern technology. This is also going to increase our plant capacity and also support the general plan objectives. Looking back at some of the council action items, the council approved the community workforce agreement and also acknowledged that the Water Resource Center exceeded the budget, so we eliminated that from the contract and proceeded with the base contract and authorized construction of the project. Just a little background in terms of the funding resources. We have $140 million coming from the State Revolving Fund, SRF, and also roughly about $7 million in grants. The $7 million includes about $4 million in debt forgiveness from SRF. So where are we at with the project? I'm happy to report that after 3 years of construction, the project is within budget. We're approximately 75% complete, and we're expecting to get the permit to operate the facility by the end of July. Barring any unforeseen conditions, we're expecting to be in substantial completion by December, so towards the end of the year. And that has come with a series of challenges that we've been able to overcome. So I created a short list of some of the hurdles that we've been able to discuss with the teams, and that includes the pandemic in 2020, impacts to manufacturing and logistics for the equipment. We also encountered material shortages and admixtures for concrete, copper materials, and stainless steel. And in the instances where we did have materials that were completed and getting shipped out, we ran into issues with the shipping ports being closed. So we had to get creative in terms of how to get that material onto the site. We're also dealing with a 100-year-old plant. So in our construction meetings, we refer to this as doing open heart surgery while running a marathon. And it's nothing short of a small feat. So the construction team that we have has been doing an excellent work. Since the start of construction, we've roughly had about 30% of our staff that began with the project retire. And going back to the beginning of the project, at the start of the design, it's been roughly about 50%. So that institutional knowledge has been something that we focused on and really engaged the whole team to try to make sure that we were providing a succession plan. The biggest hurdle with that has been developing a high-performing team. And so that included a lot of communication, collaboration, and engagement into the projects, just to ensure that communication was clear and the objectives were established. With all of these hurdles, there are several success stories. I wanted to just focus on that real quick. Up to date, we have a perfect safety record. That's been one of our #1 priorities for the whole project. I wanted to make sure that not only the plant staff was provided a safe environment, but also the construction and the subcontractors. We've completed over 300,000 hours of labor hours, and that includes some of the local labor that goes through the community workforce agreement. Today, we're roughly about 83% of that as a local participation. We've been able to capitalize on the apprenticeship program, so these type of projects don't come very often. And so the apprenticeship program has provided the pathway for the future contractors that are building our infrastructure. In addition to all of the activities throughout construction, we've been able to recycle some of the demolished materials. So those include asphalt pavements or concrete structures that have been recycled. And in some cases, that's provided some cost savings. So I'm happy to report that the project is within budget. And just to highlight the amount of collaboration that has transpired, especially with the material shortages, we had a big hit on delays with stainless steel. And that ability to collaborate with all the parties has allowed us to resequence some of that work. So that beginning part of 2022, we ran into the stainless steel that was not on site, and we had labor crews waiting for some activities. So we engaged the contractor, identified some activities that needed to get reshuffled, and we decided that our equalization basin was something that we could pull from 2023 into 2022. And the reason I emphasize that activity is as part of the design, we engaged with Cal OES through a hazard mitigation grant program, and they allowed us to do a flood study of the facility. It's an essential facility, and it allowed us to look at facilities that were subject to flooding. And so with that in mind, when this opportunity came up, we decided to construct the equalization basin last summer. This is a picture of the equalization basin located at the north side of the plant at the beginning part of the summer. And towards the end of November, it was completed. And as we all know, the first part of this year, we had a tremendous storm that came through, and it allowed us to protect a lot of the facilities that we had constructed. So getting those flood protections ahead of schedule was a huge benefit. It was a morale booster for the entire team all across the board. And in general, we had about 10 times the amount of flow that was coming into the wastewater treatment plant, the WRF. And we didn't have a single spill to report on that. So just a tremendous feat on that aspect. So looking forward, where are we going? Once we get the membrane bioreactor and ultraviolet disinfection system up and running, we're going to be able to provide high quality recycled water and water to the creek. That also means that we're going to be using less chemicals. And going forward, after we get familiar with the new technology, we're going to be able to optimize the operations. We're also going to be having benefits to the environment. This includes some of the upgrades to the biosolids handling facility. This will translate in reduced odor problems, increased recovery of resources, both on the biosolids side and the recycled water. And on the biosolids side, we're going to be able to produce additional methane, which then feeds our cogeneration that's on site to produce electricity. And then obviously the membrane bioreactor is going to provide a high quality of water that will protect the creek flows. The other benefit that we'll have is resiliency. All of the designs were done to the current codes. So we'll have seismic, flood, and fire protection throughout the project. And we'll be able to experiment with the new technology as we get familiar with the optimization of the process. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we had to eliminate the water resource recovery or the water resource center due to budget constraints. So one of the projects that will be coming in the future will look at the maintenance requirements and how do we engage the new equipment with the plant staff to be able to optimize and maintain that equipment. We'll also provide benefits for the community. We'll continue to search for partnerships with Cal Poly, and this will translate in additional research projects as well as increased opportunities for internships, both on the operator side and with engineers. And as we get closer to the end of construction, we'll be able to pave a lot of the roads and sidewalks and increase our community engagement to do additional plant tours. So with that, that concludes my brief update on the project, but I'd be remiss if I didn't go back and focus on all of the let me try that again. Hey, Teresa? I mean, sorry about that. I just wanted to take this opportunity and really thank all of the hard work that the entire team has been doing behind the scenes. As part of the agreement, we had a provision to do partnering sessions. So we brought in a third-party facilitator to be able to bring in the construction team, the inspection team, the program team, and the subcontractors to engage on some of the challenges that were ahead of us for construction, be able to put that on the table and provide mitigation strategies. And also wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of the staff at the Water Resource Recovery Facility. They've been investing a lot of time to be able to support with construction, and at the same time continue to operate the existing plant to treat water. So with that, wanted to hand it over back to the council for any questions, and also wanted to thank the council for supporting us in this important project.
Thank you. That was a great update. And every time we talk about this, I'm just so excited to see where we're at. And I just can't believe that we're potentially going to be really December 2023, this year, finished with this entire thing is just awesome. Such a huge project. It's just amazing. And to be on time, zero safety, great job. Any council member comments? Councilmember Pease.
Just briefly want to thank you for bringing that forward. It's been such a huge effort and kind of invisible, which is just because it's been going so well. So good job on all of that, and to be able to get the update on the workforce agreement and the local, and that and the piece of the apprenticeship, which I think was one of the big reasons why we are so supportive of those workforce agreements, to have like that commitment so that people can get through the apprenticeship program. So thanks and glad to hear about the partnering sessions as well.
Yeah, thank you for putting out the apprenticeships in the CWA too. Councilmember Francis.
Just a truly impressive list there of accomplishments. And also, I think I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it was your foresight in ordering a lot of the materials as the COVID pandemic began that kept us on time and on budget. And I just wanted to extend a huge thank you from the city.
Thank you so much. I think that's any other comments? Okay, great. No other questions or comments. So thank you very much for your time. All right, we're going to go ahead and move forward to the city manager report.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to cover a few items tonight. I'm going to start off with just talking about, go ahead and move to the next slide. There is no American history without Black History Month. And so we're asking this month for people to join us in recognizing the many significant contributions made by African Americans throughout the nation and within our community. Racial and ethnic diversity enriches our community. It's part of our vision statement, the council's adopted vision statement, and we strive to make San Luis Obispo a welcoming place for all, and that includes celebrating contributions of people who often go unrecognized. And so throughout the city, you'll see some of the learning opportunities up at Cal Poly campus. And so we encourage folks to take advantage of some of those opportunities. And if you have any particular questions, reach out to Nestor, our new DEI manager, who will be introducing at our next meeting. I had the pleasure on Friday of running across the mayor up at Cal Poly as we saw a variety of booths on campus, and just really excited to see the activities on campus and all of the activities that will be taking place next month. I want to share with the council just the final results from our Eat Local bonus program. It did sell out in the first 20 days of promotion. We had 1,100 diners that were rewarded for eating out. Although $100 in receipts qualified for the reward, the average receipt submitted was $131 in total. And so the program generated about $171,000 in direct local spending at restaurants, eateries, cafes during the month of January. So it was very successful. And I want to thank Molly, Lee, Greg, and our partnership with the Chamber for making that happen. Other thank yous that I want to share is just want to thank the community for showing up. We had some great turnout. Over 200 people showed up at the forum. We were able to take advantage of some new technology and move away from the dots to create an interactive experience where community members were able to see their input collected real time, and people were also able to participate at home. And so the information gathered from the public will be used during Saturday's goal workshop this Saturday, beginning at 9 a.m. here in the council chambers. We'll be getting that goal setting exercise. Moving to the next slide, an update on our HRC grant program. HR received 29 grant proposals with funding requests ranging from $4,000 to $52,000. The total funding request was just nearly $400,000, and the council has allocated $150,000 to be allocated. The grant committee met last night to read and provide recommendations. They were hard at work, and as a reminder, the HRC prioritizes the funding for economic and social well-being, homeless prevention, affordable and alternative housing, supportive services, and transitional housing. So it's a lot of variety, a lot of needs out there, as you can see from the application. Other efforts underway, and this was an item that the council added from ARPA funding. Unfortunately, we were able to get some outside funding to develop the city's first broadband strategic plan. And so this strategic plan is going to serve and expanding broadband for the community's internet service needs. And so we're working with a national consulting and engineering firm, Magellan. So we're currently seeking information, and an online survey has been made available at slowcity.org/broadband, and the survey closes on February 15th. Staff will be updating the city council at a study session on April 4th. And again, just a reminder, the project is funded through a $100,000 grant from the California Public Utilities Commission. And just by way of background, the council allocated $600,000 in total ARPA funding, $100,000 for the overall strategic plan. So we'll be updating the council at that meeting about what is our temperature and sense of ultimately whether or not outside funding is going to be available, and whether we're going to need to hang on to that ARPA funding to implement the strategic plan. Other efforts out there that we're engaging the community on is we're engaging the community on parking and access to neighborhoods, including downtown San Luis Obispo. And so we're inviting the community to review the draft 2023 Access and Parking Management Plan. It is ensured to look at safe and access to downtown SLO and the residential neighborhoods. In particular, it's going to provide a framework, an updated framework for the council to look at. And so we look forward to getting feedback. We really invite the community to take a look at this. We have not updated this plan in nearly a decade. And so it is really the community's opportunity to really have an impact on the future of parking and transportation in San Luis Obispo. The deadline for that feedback is February 10th. We're going to quickly package up that feedback in anticipation of the council meeting scheduled for February 21st. Moving forward, kind of switching to 3CE and our ag electrification program. I just want to announce to the community that $2.15 million is made available to ag customers through its ag electrification program. The program assists our region's agricultural industry for the transition to clean energy by offsetting the costs with replacing fossil-fueled powered equipment with all new electric equipment. The adoption of the clean, zero-emissions ag equipment, such as electric irrigation pumps, tractors, utility vehicles, is crucial to meeting the state and our local greenhouse gas emission goals. Last year, 3CE, through the Ag Electrification Program, supported 34 projects of nearly $600,000 in rebates, 22 that went to small farms or small ag operations. And through the electrification of ag equipment, the project spared an estimated 608 metric tons of CO2 in the Central Coast. So pretty exciting. And so we'll be talking about that more. Both Councilmember Marks and I serve on both the policy and I serve on the operations board. And so we'll be talking about those grant programs moving forward. And then with that, I would like to invite George Castagro, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name, so please help me with your pronunciation. We invited him tonight to provide an update to the City Council on behalf of the U.S. Small Business Administration, and he's with the Office of Disaster Recovery and Resilience.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity. Honorable San Luis Obispo Mayor Erica Stewart, Vice Mayor Jan Marks, and Council members Emily Francis, Andy Pease, and Michelle Shorsman. My name is George Costurco, and the first thing I'd like to do is just extend my gratitude on behalf of the Small Business Administration for the extraordinary and muscular engagement by the City Council and the administration of the City of San Luis Obispo, as well as by your extremely active and accommodating Chamber of Commerce, led by CEO Jim D'Antona. Without these pillars of unwavering support, we wouldn't be able to serve as well as we have since the catastrophic event of early and mid-January. So we really are grateful. I also wanted to let you know that the offices of U.S. Representative Salud Carbajal, State Senator John Laird, and Assemblywoman Dawn Addis remain equally strident and supportive of our mission to offer services to the residents of the city as well as the San Luis Obispo County area. Along with your staff, they have been visible and present at the Veterans Hall on Grand Avenue. So we really appreciate the engagement. The numbers have been incredible. I'll share those with you at the end of my presentation. The reason we're here is the president declared a major disaster on January 14th for human loss, physical damage, and economic injury as a result of the severe winter storms, flooding, landslides, and mudslides that began on December 27th, 2022 in many parts of California. This presidential declaration covers all coastal counties now, from San Mateo to the north to Ventura to the south, and includes this county, San Luis Obispo, as what's considered a primary or designated county. And that's why I'm here. I want to explain that to everybody who's watching. What that means is when I say a primary or designated county, is that our federal program provides low interest federal disaster loans to assist businesses and residents that may not be insured or may be underinsured as a result of severe winter storms, flooding, landslides, and mudslides that began in December. So essentially for individuals and families, that includes up to $200,000 to repair or replace real estate damage for homeowners, and for both homeowners and renters up to $40,000 to replace personal property. And that can be, if it's an apartment and you've got shared people, that can, each individual can apply for that. For businesses, which includes nonprofit organizations and places of worship, property damage up to $2 million is available to repair or replace real estate, machinery, and equipment, inventory, and other assets that were damaged or destroyed. Economic injury is an economic injury disaster loan, also known as an EIDL. That also, there's eligibility up to $2 million on that, with or without property damage for working capital needs that would have been disrupted otherwise to help until normal operations resume to the disaster. So essentially, if people have seen a loss and in terms of their business flow and those kinds of things, there are loans available for that as well. So the interest rates can be as low as 2.313% for homeowners and renters, 2.375% for private nonprofit organizations, and 3.305% for businesses with terms up to 30 years. The loan amounts and terms are set by the SBA and are based on each applicant's financial condition. We also have mitigation assistance for eligible SBA disaster loan borrowers who may choose to receive expanded funding to help mitigate their home or business. So, an example, in Santa Barbara County, in Orcutt, we had some really devastating situations where literally the slabs were lifted by the waters, and it's pretty devastating. So in those cases, sometimes moving the property or the real building is an option. This is important. The application deadline for physical damage is March 16th, 2023. And for the EIDL loans is October 16th, 2023. So essentially what that means, if you get into the system, if you go down to the center, if you apply online, if you do make the phone call, if you get into the system, you're safe. Whether or not you choose to use the loan is your decision. You're not obligated. You'll find out what your opportunities are. That's really important. So we encourage everyone who has or believe they have suffered a loss to start registering with FEMA. As many of you know, we have a pretty expansive disaster recovery center on Grand Avenue. We've seen a lot of foot traffic, a lot of interest, and we are grateful for the community's support of that. So what I did want to share with you on that is the statistics as of this morning. So with just the SBA alone in San Luis Obispo County, we have approved 78 applications for a total of 3.36,700,000. Over 228 people have come in and started the process. So that's a very, very good number for a shorter time. Unfortunately, it reflects the absolutely devastating situation that people in this county have faced. And we're here to try and get things back to where it was before everything began. So that's kind of our goal. Because I've got information up on the website, I don't want to go, or up on the slides, I don't want to go into a lot of detail on some other things, but we encourage people to get online to start the process or come down to the center. So if the council has any questions, I'd be glad to answer those.
Thank you so much. It was a great amount of information in a very quick period of time.
Yeah, I was trying to keep it short for you guys. I know that you guys have a big agenda today. So
thank you. Appreciate it. And thank you for having the Disaster Recovery Center open and just sharing with everyone how they can actually access funding. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions or comments? All right. Thank you very much.
And I just want to thank Councilman Shoresman. You've been really involved and had questions, and they're great questions. And please, if anybody has questions, people know how to get a hold of us. Please send those questions to us, and we'll make sure to try and get you a timely response.
Great. Thank you so much.
And Madam Mayor, just was going to note, we will have these slides available. So if you are listening tonight and didn't catch all that information, we'll post these slides online and with the links so that you can access this information. And again, if you have questions, I encourage you to head up to the Vets Hall. There's a great support up there, and people can give you assistance.
Thank you. And I do love our new system where you can actually go right to this topic and watch this little sliver of meeting if you'd like. So now we'll move forward to the public comment. And this is the public comment for items not on the agenda. So if you have an item that you'd like to speak about that's not on this agenda, please make sure you've turned in your yellow slip to the city clerk. And city clerk, do you have people who'd like to comment?
Yes, our first commenter is Jeff Kaiser, then Heather Kaiser, and Gretchen Ross.
Thank you so much.
My name is Heather Kreiser. My husband is not here. He had to leave to make sure he didn't get a parking ticket. My husband, Jeff, and I are lead pastors at Mountain Brook Church. And so we're along the line of Kai Joaquin, and there was a multi-business sign that was removed some months ago, and we would like to ask for the opportunity to put that back up. It can be a really lovely sign. We have several of the businesses along with our church that would like to go in on that. It's very difficult to find the businesses along Calle Joaquin without some instruction at the corner of Calle Joaquin and LOVR, Los Osos Rally Road. And so at this point, it's easier for people to find our church online than it is in person. So we would love the opportunity to have that sign back. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And maybe you can speak to one of our staff members that are here today.
Hi, I'm Gretchen Ross, and I have a restaurant, Taco Temple, which is on Calle Joaquin at 1575, which is just south of LOVR. It is a really funky area of town. The traffic was redirected, I believe, about 15 years ago. A new on-ramp was built, and then there was a wetland, the reclamation project done right there. And what has happened with the rerouting and the wetland reclamation area is that it looks as though that is a wilderness area, a wildlife area. And so at the time that was done, this very large blue directional sign was put down for the businesses. Last March, when it was taken down, I spoke with the city and at the planning department, and I was informed it was taken down because it was blight, and that there had never been any agreement that they could find for putting that sign up, and we were just basically without a sign now. In that time, we've seen our business decrease in that area, and I believe that a lot of that has to do with the missing signage. The other businesses that are affected by the loss of the directional sign are the Hampton Inn, the Courtyard by Marriott, Motel 6, the Rose Garden Inn, KSBY, Filipino Ranch, and Mountain Brook Church, who just spoke. And then also I want to point out that if you do miss that turn, you have to drive at least a quarter of a mile to make a U-turn to get back in there. So we would like some help from the city council in getting our sign back, and I will be sending a letter to all of you regarding that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My name is Deborah Franklin. I'm also a co-owner of Taco Temple, and I echo, I'm here for support as well to get a sign up, because we have not had the business that we had at the beginning. And we had that multi-sign. It was it had all the businesses' names on them. And that's been there for years. And so I don't understand why they would call it blight, because whoever took it down said that it wasn't nice enough to put there. But it does affect all of our businesses, and we would really appreciate it if we could have the opportunity to put up a newer, larger sign with all of the names of our businesses, all the hotels, Taco Temple, Mountain Brook, ASBY, everyone. And I'm sure the community would really appreciate it as well. We did have that large banner that was also taken down. It was right before, I think, COVID hit. And that was really helpful for a lot of people, driving from Costco or Target, driving by. And it just, everybody needs a sign. Whoever has a business, you need some direction. So we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Definitely remember that blue sign. Hopefully you can have some conversations with staff. Any other?
Yeah. Our next speaker is Patrick Lynch, then Jack Franklin, and then Ethan Gutterman. And that's the final one.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak here tonight. My name is Patrick, and I manage the Taco Temple in San Luis Obispo. I'm going to echo the same sentiment that the prior three that came up here. So you know the area here, we're located on San Joaquin off of LOVR. When we first opened up the restaurant, the one thing that we found out almost immediately was that even though you could see the restaurant from 101 northbound and southbound, it was still hard for people to find us. We were getting phone calls. People were using Google Maps, and they would come off southbound 101. It would direct them back onto southbound because you just cross the street and go, instead of making the connection with Calle Joaquin. It was confusing for our customers that weren't familiar with our location in the area. When the pandemic hit, we followed the directive from the county to provide takeout and delivery only. We knew the only chance that we had to make it was to put whatever signage we could out there on the cross streets right there to let people know two things, that where we're at and that we're still open. We needed to let them know again that we were open for business and also guide them to get there to us a little bit easier. We posted a couple of temporary banners on each side of the street with just arrows and a telephone number and Taco Temple, and we're open. And it was amazing the effect that it had. It reminded people that we were still open, and that was very important. After things got back to normalization, so to speak, after a little bit over a year, and like I said, things got back to normal. We got a letter from the city saying that we needed to take down our temporary banners, which we understood. Okay, and we took that down, and shortly after that, the directional sign that everybody's already talked about here with all our colorful logos, and it was very attractive, and it was a nice sign, and gave us a lot of exposure. That was taken down, and we were never given an explanation why. Gretchen looked into it and got the information that she did, but again, it was just gone one day. I'm absolutely convinced that it has impacted our business as well as the hotels and Mountain Brook because of what they echoed before. And that is that people get lost, they don't see it and they make assumptions. Sales have declined a bit, and we still get calls from customers that are like, where are you guys? We can't find you. Some think we closed because customers were used to seeing that signage out there, and now that it's gone, they're not going to take the risk to go around that cul-de-sac to come in and find out what's going on. The entrance itself is not very inviting. Sometimes the foliage overgrows, and I'm sorry, on occasion there's encampments that pop up. There's debris along the sidewalks on both sides. There's shopping carts, and it just kind of makes it unattractive for people to come in, at least in my opinion. I think putting a clean, colorful sign back up like we talked about with our logos would be helpful.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate your time.
Jack Franklin, and then Ethan Gutterman.
Mayor and Councilman, thank you for allowing us to speak this evening. I'd like to echo Taco Temple. And when we first opened, I wanted to thank the city for the permitting process that they speedily put our restaurant through. I was so impressed with the planning department and the action that they took to get us open quickly, because we were simply doing ADA compliance, not changing the restaurant to any degree, just fixing it up because it was a blight. If you had dined out at Margie's Diner previously, we are the smallest business out there, but we spent an enormous amount of money to make that property attractive. We didn't have promises about the signage on Cali Joaquin, except the fact it was there. It was a large billboard sign with all of the businesses, and then it was taken down with no notice. That made us feel very unappreciated. I'm sure all the business out there feel that way. It has affected our business. Our customers, they actually think we've closed. The rumor on the street is we're for sale. I mean, it's kind of silly that that sign came down with no notice, no discussion, no nothing. So we would appreciate if the council would point us in the right direction on how to reconstruct that sign. And also the homeless population out there is completely out of control. It's scary. If you just drive out there and look, the southeast corner of the intersection, there's an encampment there. I don't know how many folks are in there. I feel bad for the homeless, but no one should live like that, nor disgrace property that way. We had to pay the police department just to come out to our property, I think 2 weeks ago, because they were tired of coming out there. So they billed us for having to come out there because our alarm system went off. We're having some issues, and we would like some some assistance. Well, we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is for items not on the agenda.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Just making sure.
Yeah. Madam Mayor, staff, council members, I want to bring up, I don't know if everyone's familiar, there's some members of the Cal Poly community that when they're not, they're in their superwoman mode, their Lois Lane mode, they work at Cal Poly. And other members that have graduated from Cal Poly, you know, it's like the biggest employer besides the county in the city. So I want to highlight the hiring of former CSU Chancellor Joseph Castro. That's still happening, and he's still coming to Cal Poly. For those of you that don't know or watching at home, I would Google Cal Matters Joseph Castro. It's a good news article talking about what happened, but the TLDR version is when he was not chancellor of the CSU system, he was the president of CSU Fresno and covered up 9 Title IX violations of one individual, and then went on to hire this individual, promoting them from a faculty member to an administrative position, increasing their wage, giving them, you know, a position of power. And that person's going to be coming to teach at Cal Poly. They're going to be teaching Business 407, or maybe 467, 4-something-7, which is business leadership. And I don't think that they've shown good business leadership in their time at Fresno or their time being chancellor of the CSU system. So I think considering the influence that the campus has on the city, just from population and from the amount of people that are work there or go to school there that live in the city, I think some sort of proclamation from the council or from the Human Relations Commission is in order, kind of condemning this action. I think it's pretty disgusting that despite all the diversity, equity, and inclusions grants, claims that the campus makes and the city makes, allowing this kind of person to be welcomed into the Cal Poly community is disgusting. And I think whether that's from council or from individual members of council or from the Human Relations Commission, I think that would be nice to hear. And I also want to talk about something that the previous speaker said. I think this kind of dehumanization of those experiencing houselessness is pretty also should not be tolerated. I think, yeah, it's kind of sad that these people are forced to live on the street, but it's just that they are forced to live there. No one wants to live in an encampment on the street. It's due to the failures of this council and the failures of our county government in providing adequate access to affordable housing and harm reduction services, like the intermediary between a permanent housing solution and a supportive housing solution. I think looking at the city goals, we'll be talking about that later. But ACAB, no Castro.
Thank you so much. Yes, the CSU has some interesting rules. City Manager, would you like to share about the sign?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I just want to invite Michael Codron up, our Community Development Director. He can, I think, probably give some background to the council or some details that he has. And then we can, of course, happy to meet with the business owners offline to see what's permissible under our code. Just by way of background, we typically don't allow off-site signs for businesses. And so Michael can talk a little bit about that and how we found ourselves where we are and maybe some other options.
Thank you, Derek, and Councilmember Stewart and members of the council. I don't have specific information about this instance in terms of the removal of the sign. I'm not sure if it was a code enforcement action or not, so I'll go back and research that information. Derek's correct. The city, in its sign regulations, we don't allow off-site signs for businesses, and we don't allow billboards. However, there is a process to gain approval for exceptions, and that's something that we can evaluate and determine whether or not there is a proposal that would fit the intent of the sign regulations and serve the needs of the area businesses. So that's something that we'll evaluate. I'll share my contact information with the folks that provided testimony tonight, and we'll see what we can accomplish.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, is that all the commenters? Thank you so much. Okay, so next we'll move to the consent agenda. Do any of my council members want to pull any of the items? Vice Mayor Marks.
Yes, I'd like to pull 6E roadmap for maximization of recycled water.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, let's go ahead and move to consent. Move the consent item agenda minus item 6E. Oh, yes, I always forget on this. So sorry. Do we have any public comment on these items?
Not for anything other than
6E. Perfect. Thank you so much. Can you call roll call for all items other than 6E?
Can we have a motion?
Oh, I moved it. Sorry.
I'd like to move approval of the consent agenda except for 6E.
Great. I'll second.
Vice Mayor Marks? Yes. Mayor Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Councilmember Schwarzman?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The motion passes 5-0. Sorry for being a little out of order there. Can we move to 6E? And would you like City Manager for any of your members of your staff to come up for this item, or would you like to chat about it?
Sure, Madam Mayor. I'd invite Mr. Floyd, our Utilities Director, to come up. But this was following the council direction that we received. And so this was one of the directional items to come back with a roadmap. And so we've done our best to try to interpret council majority direction on try to develop the kind of a pathway and a transparent map for both the council and the community that both communicates timeline and resources that would needed to be committed to this effort. And so if there's any areas that the council wants to give some direction on before we move forward with this effort, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Do you have anything you'd like to share first?
I really don't. I think the city manager did a great job summarizing what we're here for right now. But if there is any questions or clarifications that we can answer related to this,
I know I have one, but I'll
leave
leave it to Vice Mayor first.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, could you please put the roadmap for maximization of recycled water up on the screen? This one, is it possible? It's
Just for the clerk, just by way of reference, sorry. Yeah, page 363.
I'm sorry, I kind of sprung that on you, City Clerk, but I'll hold it up like this. Okay, I have to say that I oppose, and I've made myself clear on this earlier, selling our water outside of the city limits. And there are many reasons that I oppose that. One is that it can produce sprawl outside our urban reserve line. The other thing is that once we actually start selling excess recycled water outside of our city limits, once the drought comes back and gets really bad, we'll have to cut that water supply off. And then I was really concerned about the cost that the city would incur in order to set this thing up. Also, the distraction that it would create on the part of city staff from their primary mission, which is to supply the city residents with water and sewer and hopefully a pathway to potable reuse of wastewater once it's been properly processed. So anyway, on this chart, can you move it up, please, City Clerk? Here we go. Keep going up, up, up. Okay, all of those orange boxes down there represent needed additional resources and staffing. And there are no dollar amounts attached to this particular consequence of selling recycled water outside of city limits. However, I think this illustrates the factual basis for my objection to doing it. So I would like to, I'm going to be voting against this, although I must say I appreciate all the work staff has put into it. And I understand that they were following majority city council instructions. But nonetheless, I think it's really would be a huge mistake for us to go in this direction.
Thank you, Councilmember Schwarzman.
Are we asking questions right now or deliberating, and we're still going to hear public comment, right?
Questions first and then comment.
Okay, that's what I
Public
wanted to
comment and then our deliberation.
Yeah.
I know you
Okay.
did.
Just wanted to make sure. So, per Vice Mayor Marks's comments and the timeline, which is kind of the next page after the roadmap that is put up here, Can you give us an idea, and maybe it was in the staff report, but I don't remember off the top of my head, what would the time frame be in your rough estimation for when we might need these additional resources that are marked in orange?
Yeah, thank you. I also would like to clarify that, as Councilmember Marks did point out, there are a lot of boxes in orange, and I do want to clarify that each one of those does not represent an individual FTE. I know that's fairly obvious, but I just wanted to make sure that folks at home who might see this for the first time in this visualization weren't under the impression that that's what we were looking at. We believe that everything that is in the dark blue boxes can be accomplished by existing staff, but we do believe that there are additional or an additional FTE that would be required to do this additional work. This would be something that would be perhaps brought forward with the 23-25 financial plan, and staff are still contemplating the best way into which to make this happen. As it stands right now, what we're looking at is perhaps not a standalone FTE. Again, this is all preliminary at this point while we're still strategizing. However, we are looking at, we have over the past several years brought on the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act work and the ongoing work with that. We have brought on additional water conservation requirements that the state has brought through regulations and legislation, as well as we are undergoing a groundwater expansion program right now that we are soon to hopefully hear whether we receive the $6 million in additional grant. With all of those and this additional work on our existing recycled water program, we have not added any additional staffing to date over about the past 3 years or so to that program. So if we do move forward with this in terms of a recommendation, it would probably be an integration into that larger water resources program. So to more concisely answer your question, Councilmember Shorsman, that would be after the adoption, if approved, if that is what goes forward for a recommendation to council, it would be after the adoption of the 23-25 financial plan that we would seek to hire those additional resources. Everything in Cobalt Blue, we believe we can handle internally and keep momentum going to that point.
So to just clarify a little bit, so I mean, are you thinking that the items that are in green and blue are, you know, a year's worth of work? And is that even possible to do? It sounds like there would be, you know, maybe an FTE, maybe even some other funding sources to cover it if we got to that point. But like, how long could we go before we needed those additional resources?
Before you answer that, could you move forward to the timeline, City Clerk, please? Or up or down? I forget which one. 365. Oh. Thank you. Sorry, just easier to follow along visually.
It starts in March 2023 and goes through the end of 2024. So I'm just trying to get an idea. Would it be like halfway through our financial plan or 2/3, like roughly?
Yeah, I believe right now the chart in front of us is our best professional guess at this point. I'd be a little bit hesitant to give an exact on that. There are a lot of factors that are also going to come into play on that. If this is what council opts to do and we do move forward this evening with your direction to do this, I think we'll really have a better idea of what plays out once we release the RFIP and we receive some of those initial go, no-go points on this. So we really know what the scale and kind of scope of what we're looking to achieve with that is.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pease. Oh, sorry, Francis. Sorry, it went away. Councilmember Pease.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Floyd, could you clarify, though, the orange, if there are incremental cost increases due to selling of recycled water outside of the city or selling that recycled water, that the incremental cost, even due to staffing, would be recovered as part of the cost recovery of selling that water, correct?
That's an excellent point. Per Prop 218, the city water fund in this point in time, as an enterprise fund operating under Proposition 218, would need to be made whole and in its entirety on that. So, yes, any additional cost, if we had to go out with outside consultants, any additional staffing costs, those would all have to be incorporated into the final per acre foot cost by contract.
So thank you. And so in kind of going through those dark blue, it's really to get to a point where we've gone far enough along that interested parties could kind of make a go, no-go decision for themselves commit to the incremental funding, even for that exploration, for that next stage of analysis, or if there's grants or whatever, but that they are committed partners necessarily. They have to be. If they still end up, if we go through the orange and it doesn't work out, but they've invested with us, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Floyd. You've already answered this question for me, but for the sake of the public, I just wanted to ask, our next step here on the timeline is to release our price point sometime between March and June, and there potentially could be some distance between the price point we have to sell at versus the price point that the growers are willing to pay. And if at that point we can't reach a consensus, it's my understanding that that's where this process stops. Is that correct?
As it is laid out in the existing roadmap, that is correct. Unless we were to receive additional information from council or there was another conversation that needed to occur at that point. Yes, as designed in the roadmap, there is a sharp go, no-go point on this. And if we did not have any other folks come to the table interested in that at that price point, when we figure out a little closer what that is, then staff would actually go back to those other parts that we had discussed back with council in November, which is further expansion of our in-city right there and looking for those in-basin opportunities, though those might be a little more challenging to achieve. But yes, to your direct question, we would stop there.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. So that means in that further below orange section, we wouldn't even be touching that section if that was the case.
Correct.
Okay, thank you so much. Any other questions? Do we have public comment?
Yes, we have one. Bob Chiwad.
Did you say Bob Shebelhead? Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council members. Bob Shebelhut, President of the Edna Valley Growers Mutual Water. I want to echo comment of Councilperson Pease. There's a number of off-ramps on this roadmap. I think that's really important to keep in mind. But for me, the most important thing to keep in mind about this whole process is the reason that we've been pushing so hard is every year, for the last 15 years, there's been an excess of 1,000 acre-feet dumped in the creek that goes out to the ocean that's wasted. Over all these years, we've accumulated a groundwater deficit of overdraft of 1,000 acre-feet. So what we proposed, and I know that Councilperson Francis wasn't at the meeting in which we talked about this earlier, but I think most of you, I know Shoresman will remember the excellent letter that George Donati, our vice president, sent. And we emphasized that our proposal, and we recognize that this is bigger than the growers. There's lots of different people who could be interested in the recycled water. But as for us, our proposal has always been not to be a threat to the city, but to present a no-risk contract. So we're not looking to have the city say, okay, you have to provide us for 500 acre-feet for 10 years and we'll pay so much. What our offer has been is that we want to take the water that's being wasted, the excess water, as long as you can't sell it to somebody else for a higher price. And if and when a drought comes and the city wants it back, you get it back. It's been a no-risk proposal. So now there may be other people who would want a different kind of contract, but at least when you're going down the roadmap, please keep in mind that as far as the growers are concerned, we want to cooperate with the city. We don't want to be a threat to the city, but for so long as there's excess water going to the ocean, we think there's a much better use, and that's to have the ag habit out in the Edna Valley and enhance the green belt, which I know that you people really appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other speakers?
No, there are not.
Okay. Now is the deliberation. Councilmember Shoresman.
I just want to commend staff for doing a great job at putting this very complex issue into a very pretty diagram that is very clear, and I think it represents really well the direction that was given. And that was not an easy to understand meeting when we were all deliberating about this, but it prioritizes It prioritizes all of the things that we talked about in terms of within the basin, the short-term nature that this would be most likely in almost all circumstances that we can see right now, and still gives us the option to fund the effort if we get to that point in a sustainable way. So I'm looking forward to supporting it, and think that you all did a great job representing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Marks.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier when we deliberated about this, but we just got this great report about the WRF, and that's a big step toward potable reuse. And it seems to me that there are ways that we could use the extra wastewater that's produced by the WRF in the city, bringing it north to landscape, older landscape in the city, where people have gotten in touch with. I've gotten emails, hey, I want to use recycled water and want to save water. I don't like putting potable water on my garden. I'd like to have recycled water. Also, creating an injection well field and identifying that and injecting the wastewater into the ground and storing it there for future use, for future drought. So I think the city has a great history of becoming water safe. And I think we need to continue in that direction. And we don't need to create extra work for the staff. We also, at this point, do not need the money. And I feel it's an initiative that would be a huge mistake if we went down that road. There are a lot of other initiatives we'll talk about in another item tonight that are much more deserving in terms of staff time and treasure investment into this direction. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and I appreciate your concern for the water and all the work and all the money that we've invested in the water. And actually, that's one of the interesting conversations we had last time was when we talk about the WRF, we actually won't be able to utilize all the water, all the excess water for up to about 8 years. And so this was not a forever plan. This was only to look at this excess water during the now to 8 years. And obviously when I say now, that means, potentially 24 months on this timeline. And I also just want to make sure that it's also clear that injection is the future. We are looking at how do we put that money back, the water back into the groundwater. And that is definitely our goal as we go forward, even when we get to the end of that excess use was the plan. And I just want to make sure that it's very clear, because Vice Mayor, you've said a couple times our water. This is our recycled water, not our actual fresh water. And I just want to make sure that's very clear out into the community, because I've gotten comments that, why are you selling our water? I thought we had a rule around that. And we do, and we are not selling our fresh water. So I just want to make sure that's really clear. And then I think one of the things that we talked about too, whether it's the orange boxes or the timeline, is we don't know what the fees look like yet. We don't know what that looks like. And that's something that will be determined in that timeline. And I appreciate how you said it, Councilmember Pease, the go, no go. That's kind of on both ends, right? Like whether it's us or whether it's the growers. And one question I forgot to clarify with you, Mr. Floyd, is this would not be for sprawl, not be for commercial use. It would only be for ag. Is that correct? That's correct. Okay, great. That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure as we're talking about this. And for myself, I'm still very concerned about the legal precedents we could be setting with this basin and having to give water in perpetuity. So I do very much appreciate that while I wanted this timeline to be shorter, as I said to the city manager in our agenda review, I appreciate also, though, the legal complexities of water regulation and what we have to do. So I would love to see this be a shorter time period and be able to use it for what our goal is. But I also want to make sure that we're being safe with our water and protecting our community members in forever using what our resources are and our money is. So thank you very much. Any others? Councilmember Shoresman.
You just said many of the things that I was going to say, but I just want to reiterate too that I appreciate your concern about our recycled water and about our appropriate use of that, both in the short and the long term. I don't think that going forward with the next step of this roadmap negates any of our ability to continue to, as we are able to, use more of our own recycled water. I think the guardrails are built into this to make sure that even the recycled water is used for our needs as a city first before it's used elsewhere. And again, as the mayor said, it's relatively short-term situation that would be using this for. And so I'm ready to make a motion to receive and file if nobody else has any other comments.
There's one more comment, Councilmember Francis.
Just going to say that I share many of the concerns expressed by Mayor Stewart and Vice Mayor Marks. But I would like to see per Prop 218 what our asking price is going to be, what that would include, which takes us to our next step on the timeline. So I'm happy to second the motion laid by Councilmember Shoresman.
Great, thank you. If there are no other comments, we had a motion from Councilmember Shoresman and a second from Councilmember Francis. And so, City Clerk, can we call roll?
Councilmember Shoresman?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marks?
I'm going to vote yes on receiving it and filing it, but I would like to have the minutes reflect that I object to the concept of selling our wastewater outside the city limits.
Mayor Stewart?
Thank you.
Yes, the motion passes 4-1. Thank you so much for that good conversation. Okay, we're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break, and we'll see you back for the budget. That'll be a long conversation. All right, well, welcome back. Thank you so much for your patience. And we'll go ahead and move forward to the fiscal year 2023 mid-year budget review. And we have budget analyst Natalie Harnett and finance director Emily Jackson to present the report.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I'm going to kick off tonight's presentation and then hand it over to Natalie, who will go take you more into the details tonight. There we go. So there's a number of recommendations before your council tonight. The first, of course, is that you receive, discuss, and ask any questions you have on the mid-year budget report. That you adopt a draft resolution to approve the recommended amendments to the current year budget. And then third, that you provide direction to staff on whether or not to include a number of one-time budget allocations made in 21-23 financial plan as listed in Appendix B within Attachment A. And the purpose of asking for guidance on that this evening is so that we can factor those considerations and those costs into the base budget as we work to continue to develop the financial plan for 23-25. So in terms of a timeline and process check-in, we are now 3/4 of the way through the current financial plan cycle and halfway through the current fiscal year. By policy, your council is supposed to review budget and financial condition every 6 months. We exceed that policy requirement by providing a report to your council and asking for your consideration on a quarterly basis. And of course, that's done in the interest of transparency and good financial management, as shown on the quarterly reporting boxes on the bottom of this slide. So the purpose of tonight's presentation is really to focus on what is happening in the current year to the extent, of course, that it puts us in a good position at the end of the year and then factors into the coming year, the coming 2-year financial plan cycle. So this evening we will be providing a budget update. It's not current, it's as of the end of the calendar year 2022. So we know that quite a bit has happened since that time. And so we will also be factoring in storm response and consideration of measures in the fiscal health contingency plan to the discussion this evening, as well, again, as seeking your input on mid-year expenditure recommendations before your council this evening. So of course, all of that goes together and feeds into the development of the 23-25 financial plan, as we know that the revenues we receive and the expenditures that we make in the current year impact our development of the coming 2-year cycle. In addition to the inputs to the financial planning process, also for additional context, want to review the updated 5-year general fund forecast, discuss our current assumptions, and then inform your council about what all of this means in preparation for the goal setting workshop this Saturday, February 11th. So with that, that concludes the introduction, and I'm going to turn it over to Natalie for the remainder of the presentation.
Thank you, Emily. So first, we'll just take a quick look at our expenditure budget update as of the end of the calendar year. I have a table here that shows all of the city's operating expenditures by type. This is all of our major funds, so our general fund, including the enterprise funds. So staffing is generally the easiest area to track progress, since the contractual obligations and some of the other miscellaneous costs seen on lines 3 through 5 can be a bit lumpy. Overall, we're at 45% expended in staffing, which is right where we want to be, but very minimal salary savings. All departments have vacancies right now. However, due to excessive overtime costs, specifically in some of the public safety departments, that balances out with the savings that we would see due to the vacancies. One big thing to note here is that this does not include any of the overtime costs associated with the storm that Emily had mentioned. So those mostly occurred in January, and we'll see those in the third quarter report. The unfunded liability payment is made at the beginning of the year. That actually saves the city about $300,000 to $400,000 a year, as opposed to if we were to make the monthly payments. So that's why you see that almost entirely expended. Looking at revenues for the general fund, major tax revenues are exceeding projections significantly. We expect to see a 4% growth in sales tax revenue compared to last year, and TOT is expected to end the year marginally higher than last year, which was $10.6 million. Our fee revenue is generally on track. We do have one negative adjustment that's partially canceling out the increases in the general fund, and that is due to a $1.5 million negative adjustment to account for fair market value adjustments. So this is something we've seen for the last couple of years and haven't budgeted for, and it's hit us pretty hard. So that's why we added that into the budget this year. The other funds just have some minor adjustments due to for gas taxes based on the state's estimates. And then with the sewer fund, just to clarify, this is not new revenue, but it's just a change in the timing when we actually received the revenue related to, or expect to receive, related to the wharf project. So these receipts are contingent on the project timelines, and budgeting for them is a bit of a moving target. Transit also has some unanticipated discretionary FTA funds that were added, so that's the variance that you see there. Mid-year budget allocations. So mid-year adjustments are generally pretty small. Some of you might remember fiscal year 21-22 was a bit of an anomaly. We added a lot of budget changes at that time, but we've reverted back to our normal, just making critical adjustments as needed halfway through the year. So in the general fund and the utilities funds, we've added additional budget for staffing contingencies. The way that staffing contingencies work is that we budget for the additional expense in a contingency account, but don't utilize the funds unless the departments can't absorb the costs. So often the contingency is not necessary, and then at the end of the year, we release it back to the fund balance. The Public Works Department has also requested $20,000 to replace the swim center boiler. This is considered mission critical, and given the smaller dollar amount, doesn't qualify for use of the capital reserve. The city now also has a CASP certified deputy building official who's been very instrumental in reviewing the funds that we receive from the CASP fee and making recommendations on how to use that. Based on the bill language, it's not advised to use these fees to build capital projects. So given that policy language, staff is recommending reallocating that funding. Our deputy building official happened to be working on these types of programs already and has a sizable need for them next fiscal year. So that's why we're making that unallocation recommendation. There's also a minor true-up with the city's allocation of TDA funding that has a net neutral impact on revenues and expenditures, but we are increasing the project budget for that by about $31,000. CalPERS, one of the mid-year recommendations is to formally appropriate the planned $2 million towards an additional CalPERS payment, which will be made in April. This payment is made using the available fund balance from last fiscal year. And given where we ended the year in our audited financials, staff is also recommending using part of the revenue over expenditures to make an additional $1.3 million payment from the general fund. This will help ensure that we don't get behind on our fiscal health response plan goals, given the significant 6.1% investment loss experienced last year. Despite the storm costs and the economic unknowns, staff recommend holding to our CalPERS goals, as this will significantly benefit the city down the line. Lines 2 through 7 reflect the respective funding amount for each of the other funds. The general fund, which naturally holds the highest payment, kind of sets the stage for the rest of the fund allocations, and then the calculation is based on PERS eligible staffing costs. I also wanted to note that with the 23-25 financial plan presentations that are going to be coming up, staff are going to prepare an update to the CalPERS schedule, which will kind of show where we're at with the funding status and how the one-time payments have impacted our pay down schedule. So you'll be expecting to see that in the coming months. Year 2 of our capital improvement plan is frequently a heavy construction and production year. That's because the smaller projects are designed in the first year and then constructed in the second year. That's true for this year, and fortunately, the storm recovery has not impacted progress on a lot of our CIPs because of where most of the projects were at, either ready to bid or awarded or in the construction phase. Most projects continue to see the price escalations significantly above engineers' estimates. And as you've seen on other items on the agenda, we've been heavily relying on our capital reserve to kind of help with that volatility. For the remainder of the year, given storm impacts and the fiscal health contingency plan, staff may recommend the reappropriation of funds between projects should the need arise, but is not making any action at this time. This next slide gives a little graphic visual of our major city goal update. So we like to provide a major city goal update every quarter. It shows the number of tasks categorized by the lead department. You'll see based on the dark blue bars that most of the major city goal tasks are either completed or are on track. About 25% are delayed or have setbacks. A couple of the accomplishments in the second quarter include the additional housing element program implementation and the inclusionary housing ordinance. So right now, as you know, storm response is the city's top priority. We've estimated over $9 million in damage to capital, and that includes operating impacts as well. I think the key word here is estimate. There's still a lot of unknowns, and the damage is still really being scoped out, but it's good to have a number, so we're just going with the $9 million for now. We know that we're going to be getting reimbursed from FEMA, but we don't know about the timing or the amount yet. So a lot of unknowns around that. The best we can do right now is kind of track our expenditures as best as we possibly can, and create different scenarios to deal with the fiscal impact. Because of the timing of the reimbursements, one of the biggest issues is just monitoring our cash flow and figuring out how we can pay for it in the meantime until we do get reimbursed. So we've recommended using the reserves for the time being, since the city does have a full reserve at the current moment. And because of the need to tap into the reserves, the city manager activated the fiscal health contingency plan, which was a plan that was developed in 2001 and has multiple different triggers that would cause us to activate it, but one of them is natural disasters. The contingency plan is not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's really just kind of a framework and a general approach in responding to adverse fiscal circumstances. Right now, we're at the point where we're just asking departments to really scrutinize and monitor their expenditures. We have a staffing chill, which is not the same as a staffing freeze, but we're just evaluating all of the vacant positions prior to recruitment of them. Overall, the city is in good financial standing, and the plan will help us hedge against future variables outside of our control. As part of the 21-23 financial plan, the council allocated over $6 million in one-time money over the 2-year period. Most of these items were really one-time in nature. However, some of them were funded as a pilot program basis or just for the 2 years due to we had some one-time infusion of ARPA and we weren't sure of the general economic uncertainty with the future. So we had just funded them on a one-time basis. Staff has reviewed the full list and reduced it to what we believe are the essential and critical items that support operations. So you'll see that list in Appendix B. In total, it's about $1.8 million that was programmed into the long-term forecast. In many ways, this is just a placeholder number, but staff would like to get council's initial feedback on whether to include these items in the base budget, which would happen before preparing the preliminary budget in April. So if council did want to fund this list, then staff would return with a consent item to formalize that action later. So I have a couple slides after this that show the general fund long-term forecast, but some of the assumptions going into that first. Prior to budget development, we always create an updated 5-year forecast. The forecast is really meant to serve as a planning tool that shows the high-level fiscal standing of the city. It will certainly change over the next several months. However, the numbers help to kind of inform decision-making during goal setting and later down the line. So some of the assumptions are staffing is in line with negotiated agreements and the labor relations objectives. We have a 3% inflator on non-staffing items. The capital budget was increased by about 19% to help offset CCI increases. We're at, I think, around 23%. And then all of the one-time operating budget allocations, with the exceptions of the ones that were in Appendix B, which are on a separate line, have been removed. One of the biggest unknowns in the forecast right now is obviously the storm costs and the reimbursements. We're learning more about this on a daily basis, and we already know that the version that you're seeing in the report, which was finalized last week, has pretty much changed. So it's going to be changing, but hopefully it'll help kind of give a picture of where we're at. This forecast assumes a maximum reimbursement of costs that would occur within 6 to 12 months after the storm expenditures. And then ultimately, any unreimbursed costs would be paid for by either reallocating CIP budget or reallocating operating budget. So this is a simplified version of the large table that's in the report on page 6. But it gives an overview of the current position and how the storm expenditures fit in. So you'll see total revenue, total expenditures. We have our revenue over expenditures, and then I've added the storm expenditure estimate on line 39. We're in this version are just assuming that those expenditures are split over the 2 years equally. Of course, it's probably not going to be exactly like that, but it doesn't change the long-term picture necessarily what year they're in. I wanted to point out that our reserve policy is generally it is a 20% reserve policy of the city's annual operating budget. So you'll see here I have circled If we assume that all of these storm expenditures are paid for, you're using our operating reserve, it brings it down to about 13% funded. But you'll see in the blue numbers on line 45, that's the general fund unassigned fund balance. And then you'll see in the other two columns, 6 to 12 months afterward, we have the assumed reimbursement from the state and FEMA. And then in this next version, you'll basically see if we use our unassigned fund balance to temporarily kind of replenish the reserve, we get pretty close to the 20%. And that keeps us in a pretty good position. And then I have the same numbers plugged in columns D and E. And then in the third year, you can see that there's a pretty significant increase in revenue due to the reimbursement. So this will go directly back to the reserve, and it'll get us back to 20% funded, and we'll get more of that undesignated fund balance back. So keeping in mind this is the best case scenario, likely reimbursement is going to take longer, and some of the costs might not be eligible. But we'll continue to monitor and update this. I've also highlighted there on lines 42 and 43. As a reminder, we do have a revenue stabilization reserve as well, and we have the 115 trust fund, which both of those can help to be used to offset expenditures in years where the budget is tight or revenues for some reason don't hit the projections. So burning question, what does this mean for the 23-25 financial planning? I think the key messages are that we are and we're very well prepared, and we have a balanced budget, but the storm response will continue to be the city's top priority moving forward. There's a lot of moving parts right now, and the numbers are going to change the more we learn. Because of the cost escalation pressures mentioned before on both the capital and the operating side, we'll need to be mindful about what new initiatives mean and how they impact our existing operations. So as we move forward towards the third quarter budget report, we will continue to provide council with information regarding the storm costs, as well as the reimbursements and how that situation continues to evolve. And then, of course, we have our goal setting workshop on Saturday, this coming Saturday at 9 o'clock to 2 p.m. And that concludes the presentation. I will bring back the recommendation slide and open it up to you for questions.
As always, that's a lot of information, but thank you. I want to open it up to my colleagues. Do you have any initial questions regarding the budget? I asked many questions in an email, but thank you, City Manager, for answering the 8 this morning. Pass it on. Council Member Pease. I don't know. It's turned normal.
Go ahead. Okay.
We're going to go with that.
Let you go. Thank you so much. I think the only questions that I have really are about work plan, kind of the work plan status. There was a couple of studies that are maybe in progress, and I'm just checking to see kind of what are we hearing so far, what's the timing. So there's kind of a participating in a downtown vacancy and vibrancy task force. I'm curious if there's any findings in there. Economic development strategic plan, and then the multicultural center. So if we could kind of just get a little bit of a status update on those.
Yeah, if I could ask Deputy City Manager Greg Harmon, those are all questions for his department, and he can give you some answers.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and Council members. So the first question in terms of downtown vacancy and vibrancy, that was a task force that we formed during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then it's a regular recurring agenda item that we have in weekly meetings with both Downtown SLO, and then a quarterly meeting that we have with their board chair and other Downtown SLO leadership. And so we established a dashboard to be able to track the vacancies in the downtown over time so that we could understand on a relative scale the impact of the programs that we're having. So it is an ad hoc group that we can pull together when needed. So basically we can reach out to different property owners in the downtown and ask for assistance or ways in which we can make downtown more vibrant when needed, but it's not a standing group that we meet with on a regular basis. One quick example of when we were able to do that effectively is partnering with Downtown SLO on the artwork that we were able to put on the vacant Ross and Beverly buildings over the holidays. The Economic Development Strategic Plan is currently underway. We're planning to bring that to the City Council in July for adoption. We've received some initial input from internal stakeholders, and we're beginning the process of identifying who all the external stakeholders are for engagement. That'll include an open City Hall topic, so we'll have an opportunity for the community at large to also be able to provide input into that topic. And then as we get closer to the completion of that plan, we'll likely have some placeholder items in the financial plan that are items that we see rising to the top related to that. The multicultural feasibility study, there's a group that we've been working with at Cal Poly for some conceptual ideas on that. We're going to bring that to the HRC next month for an initial review. We have dollars that were allocated in the budget. Those have been carried over into the current fiscal year, and our plan is to hopefully be able to encumber those in the current fiscal year, and then they would carry over into the next financial plan to be able to move that item forward. We are delayed on that item and a couple other DEI-related items, and that's merely because that plan was scaled to, for 2 years worth of full staffing and work, and we haven't had full staffing in that program over that time period.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Shorsman.
Oh, thank you. I was already on. Thank you for the great presentation. As always, lots of great detail. A couple of things, and thank you also for answering my multiple questions via email over the last 24 hours. I really appreciate that. A couple more sort of detailish things that I found after I emailed you all those questions. On page 374, I think that's the table that in the packet that shows revenues so far this year. And it looks like, overall, obviously some are over 50%, some are under 50%, but in total, it looks like we're at about 35% of expected revenue for the year, if I'm reading that right. Is that usual, or should it be more closer to 50, or just curious what the expectation is on that?
Yeah, that's a super good question. So that is usual because as of December, when this report was published, we had only received up until it would have been September of sales tax. We also received the majority of our property tax in the spring. So that comes in two big disbursements. And same with TOT, it lags a little bit in cannabis tax. So that's totally normal.
Okay, thank you. And then just a clarification on the 115 trust, the money that's dedicated to put towards that in the projections and in the current year and in the coming years. That money is above and beyond what we would normally pay for our payments, our annual payments to CalPERS to try and pay off our unfunded liability within 20 years instead of 30 years, correct?
Yeah, the $3 million on line 43.
Yeah,
for the pension trust fund.
I didn't pull it up.
It's not an annual payment. It's so it's once we have that money set aside, it stays in there. So it's the same $3 million that's carrying over, but it is in addition to the additional payments. And basically, we can use it if there were ever a year when we couldn't make all of our expenditures. We can use that money to pay our normal PERS amount.
Okay, so that table is not supposing that we would put $3 million a year in it. It's the
Correct.
same $3 million. Okay, thank you. That's super helpful. And then last but not least, I asked this question via email, but I think it might be of interest to some folks, especially because of our climate change goals. But I asked about the electric buses that are proposed in the upcoming, and I think it's 8 buses total are slated to be electric in the next. We've got one that's arrived and one that's still on order, and we're planning to buy 6 more. Is that correct?
Correct.
To replace the ones that are aging out.
Correct. So we have one that we're training staff on right now. A second one we expect to arrive in the next month, and then The remaining 6 will be purchased here pretty soon through the grant funding that we received. And then Public Works staff is working on a plan to fund replacement of the remaining 9 buses, which will be included at least partially in the 23-25 financial plan.
That is exceptionally great news. Thank you.
And can you remind us, by paying down our unfunded pension liability quicker, how many millions of dollars we'll be saving the community?
Typically, typically the rule is for every additional 1 million, we save about 1 million a year.
And Madam Mayor, just to hop in, I think that Council Member Pease asked this question, I think, at one of the many budget meetings we've had leading up to tonight, which is we're going to refresh some of the work that we did to look at the payments we've made thus far, the returns on investment that PERS has realized, some of their policy changes, the changes in our workforce, because now we've had earlier retirements with some of the golden parachutes that we provided to employees, and then we've seen more employees transition to PEPRA. So we're going to do a reset. And so part of the financial plan that you'll be getting will be that impact. So we'll be able to quantify whether or not that general rule of thumb of $1 million prepay is, avoiding $1 million worth of interest over the 30-year time horizon.
Great. Thank you so much. Councilmember Francis, you were next. Did you? Okay.
But I'm still here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. I highly encourage members of the public to dig into this document. There was so much incredible information about all of the work that all of our departments are doing, and just really impressed by you all putting this together. So thank you so much. Quick question on the fiscal health contingency plan. We talked a lot about the triggers that put it in place, and just for the sake of the public, I'd love for us to talk about the triggers that take it out of place. When does it get lifted?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I can certainly let Ms. Jackson jump in. I think that's a good question, one that we wrestled with during COVID quite a lot, because we were always trying to evaluate, well, so when is this ending? And so I think probably from my perspective, when we get clarity on a couple things, because this whole this projection hinges on, one, us ending the fiscal year with that surplus in revenue, 2, us realizing 3% salary savings, 3, that we get clarity about the amount of reimbursement that we achieve, 4, labor negotiations and how we end up on those labor negotiations. So those are a lot of the variables that I think in play that really make this whole projection work. And so one or more of those aligning, particularly FEMA and the year end, may be the point where we say, we have enough certainty that we're able to, roll that back. You may be asking yourself, well, can we live for 2 years with 13% emergency reserve? We just unfortunately saw the devastating impacts in Turkey, right? And so I have to think to myself, well, what happens if something else happens? And the odds reset every single day. And so, the idea is we do have a healthy infrastructure investment fund. We don't expect to be able to use those funds, if you look at the forecast, until 24-25, particularly for the Prado Road Bridge. And for some unforeseen, unfortunate reason, we needed some cash. We've got that money sitting there in the meantime.
Thank you so much. Vice Mayor Marks.
Just a clarification question. Appendix B, that's Appendix B to Attachment A, that has the 1.8 million one-time budget allocations.
It's page 455 in the packet if you're looking.
Huh? I want to make sure that I understand the agenda correspondence that we got today about one-time expenditures that were not included in Appendix B to Attachment A. And when you mentioned earlier that you had that staff had removed things that they thought were not relevant, Did you take them from this list? Okay. And so the $6 million figure that you mentioned earlier as being one-time, that would include this list and the other list as well. Is that correct? So I just want to make sure I understand.
So the list that went out via council correspondence earlier today is the complete list. So there's some overlap between the two lists. And then I think also important to note that the $6 million was a total over the 2 years.
Over the 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot. That's all I have.
Great. I'm sorry, Madam Mayor. The purpose of presenting that, Councilmember Marks, is we wanted to show you the whole list, so you could say, well, we disagree with staff's assessment whether or not there's other essential items. And so we thought from the top, we take off the items that were truly one-time, like a one-time purchase, and or things that, for example, that were one-time costs for starting a new program. So we kind of whittled that down and then had some conversation to make, to come up with that list.
Yeah, and thank you for that list. And sorry, y'all, that was my request because I wanted to make sure that the public and us got to see the whole list, and that staff wasn't just taking things off willy-nilly, that we had some real wonderful thought behind it, so that as they presented it to us. I did have a couple more questions. Back to page 377, there was a 19% for the construction costs, which I definitely understand. Every time we get a project, it's more expensive. And I asked the city manager if that was enough. I understand that's the construction cost index, but do we know when the next one will be released? I don't know if it's a Michael or Derek question.
That's a great question. I don't see Mr. Horn here. But typically, I think last year we got that about the spring time frame. So
yeah, that's what I recall. I think the first time we presented the 23% cost inflator was at the June budget supplement.
Okay, cool. So we'll have enough time between now and the final budget, most likely, if we need to change that 19%. Kind of.
Depending on when it comes out, I think.
Okay. Okay. And then on page 378, just going back to the reserves, and I understand where we're at, where we're depending on reimbursements, and it makes sense. Just kind of reminding myself and or the public that in the middle of that budget, we'll have time to reevaluate it. If, let's say, we weren't getting reimbursed the amount we wanted and we need to cut back in the budget, we'll be able to do that at that time, right?
That's correct. Yes, we'll come back every quarter and provide updates.
Great, as per usual. Thank you so much. Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, sorry to belabor the point of this agendas correspondence that came out, but I'm confused a little bit still. So the list that was in the memo today is the complete list that was already enacted at the mid-year or during the 21-23 financial plan, and the list that's on page 455 of the packet that's just 1.8 million is sort of the most important things, the prioritized smaller subset of what is the bigger list that was sent out today. It's so everything on page 455 is also on the list that was sent out today. There's no differences. Okay.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to make sure.
And in theory, we then would memorialize the one-time items going forward in the 23-25 budget. Great. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Okay. Well, I don't see any other questions from my colleagues. We'll move forward to public comment. And City Clerk, do we have public comment on the budget?
No, we do not.
Wow. Okay. Time for deliberation. Vice Mayor Marks.
Thank you. First, I just want to thank staff for the incredible amount of information, and it's a thank you so much for doing all this work. it is really understandable in general. So thank you. My feeling is that I've always been an advocate for paying down the PERS pension liability. And but at this particular time in the budget deliberation cycle, I would like to suggest keeping our $2 million allocation, but suspending the $1.3 million from the general fund that right now is proposed. Staff is proposing adding that to the $2 million. And the reason behind that is that there's so much uncertainty. City manager just reeled off 4 things that create uncertainty: the surplus at the end of the year, the 3%, the amount of reimbursement, and the timing from FEMA, and labor negotiations. So at this point in the whole budget cycle, we don't know if we're going to be in a situation where we have to actually make cuts. And best case scenario, we don't have to make cuts. Everything's copacetic, and we can add that 1.3 million back into paying down the PERS liability. So that's my suggestion. I wondered if there's any feedback from anyone else.
Can I ask you a question? Would you propose that that goes into reserves or into the 115 going forward?
Well, we could. I'm just saying, suspend it for now, wherever it is now. It can just sort of hang there wherever it is, because it's. I don't want to call it funny money, but it's a projection, right? So I think that question of should that go to the reserves right now, what I'm proposing as a sort of halfway step is to just stick with the 2 million, hold back on the 1.3, and then when we get closer to knowing what the reality is of the budget, seeing can we really afford that $1.3 million from the general fund, or are there initiatives, are there things that council would want to do in our discretion with that $1.3 million that will not even be possible if we immediately allocate it to the PERS pay down. So I'm not backing off the PERS pay down. I just want to build in a cushion in case we're in a situation where we have to look at not going forward with some initiatives or having to cut things that are very important to the community. So I'd like to hear what anybody else has to think about that.
Thank you. I appreciate that thought process, and I hear what you're saying, and still being very careful with what we do with our paying down the pension, but also being, while we have the extra, but yet we may not in the future. Why would we spend the extra now? I hear that, so I'm open to that. Council Member Francis. Okay, there we go.
Vice Mayor Marks, I appreciate you bringing that up. I'm actually also, after hearing in particular that we're going to be reevaluating PERS in a couple of months with a new assessment, was really interested in the idea of potentially holding a part of that payment, the 1.3 million, until at least after we've heard updated evaluation of PERS and until we've finished our budget discussion this coming weekend. So thank you for bringing that up. That's all for now.
Thank you, Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, a couple of things I just want to say that I was pretty pleased to see in the report. Just reactions to the information. Glad to see the transit fund coming back and ridership looking like it's improving. Also happy to see the Emerson Park and Rigetti and the bike parks. I know those have been really popular with our community members, and so glad to see those getting ready to move forward. Happy about the new 8 buses, as you might have guessed. And I was before I heard my colleagues speak, I was ready to say that I'm in favor of putting the 1.3 million of unassigned into our CalPERS payments. I think it is consistent with what our policy has been when we've had available fund balance at this time of the year. And so, and I just know from my experience on a pension trust board that it's really, really important when we have the extra funds to do that. But I would not be opposed to, holding some of that back, or maybe doing a partial payment, or just trying to make a bigger payment at the end of the year or something like that. I also wanted to comment on the 1.8 million, I guess it is. The 455. Sorry, I'm pulling up the page again. Yeah, in the packet. So glad that was brought up a little bit already. I would have loved to, and I didn't in advance, ask a little bit more detail about some of the items on this list, but it's not really too important at the moment. But my overall sentiment about it is that it's really, these were initially going to be one-time funds, one-time expenses, and I really see the value of a number of them in making them sustaining investments. But I am having a little trouble with the time period right now with where we're at, and we haven't had our goal setting. We'll be doing that this weekend. So I guess maybe a placeholder is the right way to refer to it, but more of a temporary placeholder. I would like to see what the impacts would be of keeping these items versus doing some of the things that we might decide to do in our goal setting session. And maybe, if we had to not do all of these things, if we do find ourselves in a position where there's trade-offs, some recommendation of, the top 5, top 10 things of this list that we might prioritize above some of the others. So just some thoughts about that.
So just to make sure I understand, for the page 455, one-time items, hold off on making that decision, table that until after Saturday? Okay, just so I understand. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Pease.
Thank you so much. Just kind of a staff check-in with that concept of kind of holding this 1.8 suspended so it can be incorporated into the Saturday discussions. That sound? I guess we have to. So keep.
It's certainly that's the council's prerogative. We want to tee these items up because they were important items. Everything from climate positions to positions for homelessness. We're trying to figure out expanded funding that we provide on a one-time basis for 40 Prado. So these are planning decisions that we want to have conversations with staff and with other program partners, so that there isn't, if we need to start signaling that the money's not going to be there, then we let people know. And if it is going to be there, then to make other decisions, operational decisions. And so, we wrestled a lot with staff on this question. I think the whole entire financial plan steering committee of how to tee this up for council, because we certainly didn't want to paint the council into a corner with this. At the end of the day, I think we've been clear that new items are going to require, new initiatives are going to require trade-offs. And so, the question is your philosophy last in, first out? Or is it, which I don't think is necessarily the best budgetary approach. My recommendation is to make it based upon your priorities. And so if these are priorities today, I would encourage you to adopt those and move into the budget, understanding that if you come forward with initiatives ultimately that require trade-offs, that we look at the entire budget. And I'll be asking you on Saturday and subsequent budgets, well, what is the council's intention to help guide me so I can come back with those trade-offs?
Right.
Hopefully that's helpful for you.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So I think that does make a lot of sense to have this kind of incorporated into the Saturday discussion. I appreciate the list because it feels like it's the best of, right? These are some tried and true that we know are effective with the goals that we've had in mind. And to your point, we don't know what else is going to come up on Saturday and what those trade-offs are. So I appreciate that because there are one or two in here that I wasn't sure, but I don't want to start picking it apart at this point. And I agree with the comments in terms of, gosh, it's a great report. There's some really good things in here, and I'm like, wow, our community development department is doing these surveys and we're getting a lot of positive results and we're doing the rental housing education. And there's just so much great work that we know about as a task 2 years ago when we do the financial plan, right? And so to see each of those pieces come together is really great. And then in terms of the 1.3 million, kind of on the same page as Councilmember Shoresman in that it seems like a good idea, but I don't mind waiting a little bit just to make sure. And I really appreciate we did something similar during COVID and we're able to follow through on the commitment. And we did all those payments that we had planned on when we were in a more confident financial place. So yeah, supportive of all of that going forward.
Thank you. I think I just have a few more questions. Sorry, I should have asked those earlier. I don't want to get too deep into the work plans, because I know that's not our process today, but there was one that said on page 413, the fire department hazard prevention, it's in the green, but then it says in the text that it's categorized as yellow. So I was just kind of confused. Which one is it? Green or yellow? Just curious. Yeah. Green means we're on track. Yellow means we've got some delays.
I could just ask Chief Tuggle to come up. It looks like he's trying to navigate to the page.
We can skip. You can
Okay.
figure that out.
Yeah, we can
I go to my next
We'll come
question.
back to
We'll
that.
come back to that question. Perfect. Thank you. Sorry for the. And then the community services on page 417. Obviously, staff. I know that's been huge difficulty getting staff in the community services, and just wondering, as we talk about this on Saturday, should we be talking about this work plan in a different way and the finances in a different way?
Great question. I've had some conversations with Councilmember Francis and we have a meeting coming up with Greg Avakian and Superintendent Prater to talk about some potential opportunities. We know that there's multiple challenges with childcare, one being human capital, people, two being facilities, three being costs. I mean, there's probably things that, I'm probably leaving off the table, but those are the three that come, immediately to mind. And so one of the promising conversations we had with Cal Poly probably last fall was, some sort of partnership where Cal Poly could provide, a trained, skilled, either interns or part of their curricula to be placed in some sort of childcare program. So that is on the table. I think you're going to hear a little bit about this from Wendy Wendt when she comes on the 21st. She'll be talking about the dynamics of childcare and some things what the city can do as a city and other aspects. But I think that clearly that's something that we understand. I think you saw a couple months ago when Shelley, who I think was online and then offline, I think we brought an item forward on pay because we were seeing pay being, a barrier, when you can make, competitive wages for jobs that require less responsibility. We were having difficulty recruiting people into the role. So it's multi-pronged, and I think it will be part of the budget deliberations, and certainly we'll prep Mr. Avakian to give you a full response.
Thank you. Yeah, I just feel like there's some missing pieces budgetarily that I'm not saying it would come from that 1.3, but just that maybe we could reshift some things at that moment. And I totally understand from Mr. Herman as far as, we've had a lot of turnover in the DEI section, but when we look at the amount of yellow items, of delayed items, it is somewhat disheartening to see them all coming out of the DEI area, or majority coming out of the DEI area. And it is what it is. And when we get to page 445 around line 260, preparing mobility as a service study to guide potential implementation of programs and software tools to create an integrated platform linking access to transit, future bike share, and ride sharing services. Just curious, has Cal Poly had any more conversation with us in that line of topic?
we've already started some conversations around that. Both Cindy V and I had a meeting with our negotiation teams and talked about an interest-based discussion relative to transit and how there are a lot of shared interests between us and Cal Poly, and or in order for us to provide the level of service, what we see as some of the challenges. And it opened up, I would say, for the first time, I think some areas of understanding transit is the key way to help address them, help Cal Poly address housing issues, mobility, climate issues, equity, inclusion, and other issues that are important to all of us. And so while I don't say that we have reached an understanding on the dollar amounts, I think that there was a better understanding of the reasons why it was important to everyone and those overlap of shared interests that we hope will serve as a basis for moving forward with negotiations. And if you recall, we've got a 2-year agreement. It was a substantial increase. And so we've started now with the intent of hopefully crafting an agreement, well in advance of the expiration, so that everyone has time to make sure that this isn't coming at the last minute.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel like that will be part of the conversation during the budget. So I wanted to know how that was going. Well, thank you. I also agree, Councilmember Shoresman. I like the idea of waiting for the one-time items until we have our meeting on Saturday, since it's nice and close. And Chief Tuggle, did you have any thoughts on that hazard prevention section?
All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council, for the question. So there is actually, I must confess, a typo on the green dot. It actually should be a yellow dot. And basically what this is representing is the fact that we did bring on some new staff at the new year budget. In the process of bringing on that new staff, the ramp up time for training significantly impacted the ability to get impacted the ability for the turnaround time to improve, which was the stated goal and objective. In addition to that, we also had some illnesses related to COVID during that time. So between all those factors, bringing up the training, the COVID, new personnel, those impacted those turnaround times. So this is full transparency. We were a little behind the power curve. We are seeing that training start to catch up, and now we are starting to see those turnaround times reduce. So I would expect by the end of the year budget report, we'll have a very different answer.
Great, thank you so much. I just know there's so much work on emergency preparedness you all have been doing, and so I just wondered if that was where that was at. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that, and as far as the 1.3, I think we've all kind of given our input on that. Do we need to move forward and do the motion for you now, or do we want to wait until after Saturday?
So my recommendation is to take action on all the items, and then we'll just note for the resolution that we'll be keeping the $1.3 million undesignated. So we'll keep it there until such time, and so it'll fall to fund balance. And just want to verify that is an audited number. So that's the audited number from last year. So we have those funds on hand. I would encourage you, and I just look to the city clerk, to continue today's item to a date and time certain of this Saturday. So at the conclusion of your discussion, we can take action, or you can take whatever action you want on Appendix B. And if you want to continue at that for further discussion, but at least we've got the opportunity and option for council to weigh in and deliberate, and if so choose, take action.
Great, thank you. I think it's a wonderful suggestion, because I do think it's important that we can have this conversation and vote on it, but at the same time vote on everything else today, if that's useful for everyone. Okay, great. So Vice Mayor Marks.
Yeah, well, I think I'm looking at the resolution now that we are not going to be voting on this tonight, but we'll be voting on it Saturday after the deliberation. Is that correct? Is that what you were saying? Oh, just B. All right. So with section 4, it says the city will make $4,021,398,000 additional discretionary payments to CalPERS. I'd like to ask staff to reduce that by 1.3 million in the resolution, and then also state that that 1.3 million will be suspended. I'm not going to do the math. In other words, I don't want us to pass a resolution which is inaccurate, and assuming that my colleagues agree with me.
So my recommendation is to move forward with 1 and 2 with council direction to leave in unappropriated fund balance 1.3 million that was otherwise stipulated for funding of CalPERS, and then to continue discussion of item 3 to a date and time certain on Saturday, February 11th at 9 a.m.
So if you want to go ahead and move for the motion recommendation 1 and 2. No, number 2 still has the resolution. Yeah.
Hello. I think that the amount in the resolution is wrong, is what
Yeah,
the issue
that's what
is.
It'll go down by 1.3 million.
So just state that in the motion.
In the motion. Is that correct?
Right.
The total amount, the new amount for the resolution should be the 2.4 million. So we're going to be taking out 1.584, which is all funds combined. So that's what that number is.
That's including all the enterprise funds as well?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, I'll go back to Vice Mayor Marks so you can go ahead and finish your motion.
Yes, I'd like to move staff recommendation with the correction in section 4 of the dollar amount that we're going to be giving to PERS at this point. And then I think also we should mention that we're suspending the 1.3, or now we're saying 1.5. Right. And then, deferring decisions on Appendix B and Attachment A until 9 a.m. on Saturday. So is there any more?
I think that's it.
I think that's
Councilmember
it.
Francis?
That's my
I
motion.
would like to second that motion.
Thank you. Any questions from staff on that? Are we good? We cover everything?
I think we got total clarity. Thank you.
Great. So City Clerk, can we have roll call, please?
Vice Mayor Marks?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Councilmember Shorsman?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you so much. I also wanted to clarify, just for the record, that earlier before we went on to break, the consent agenda item 6E, that it was actually motion passed 5-0. So moving forward to our last and final item is 8A, our study session on the homelessness response strategic plan. And if Michael Codron and Daisy Weiberg and Teresa McClish will all present. And then also for anyone's here that would like to provide any comment, please turn in your yellow slips to the city clerk. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mayor Stewart and members of council. Michael Codron, Director of Community Development, and we're here to present an update to you on the homelessness response strategic plan. You'll recall that completion of this strategic plan is one of the most important tasks identified in the major city goal for homelessness response. And this is the third opportunity we've had to come to the city council and present progress and gain feedback on the way. So in the first meeting, we identified our 5 main areas of focus and received good feedback from the city council on those. We came back a second time with goals and tasks to support the goals, as well as a lot of detailed metrics. We got great feedback in that meeting, especially on the metrics with respect to measuring the things that, you want to accomplish in a clear way, but that sometimes measurements have adverse consequences. You might be measuring the wrong thing. Like, for instance, the number of grant applications is not really what we're trying to accomplish here. We're not just trying to sort of spam all the agencies and get as much grant dollars as we can. We want to be very focused with our approach and make sure that those are going to be dollars that are effective and put to use correctly. So we've modified our measures of success, which will be presented to you tonight. And also, since the last time we were here, two really important things have happened. One, we've conducted an extraordinary amount of outreach. And so that's informed the plan, and that's been a very helpful part of the work that we've done to get to this point. And secondly, the county has adopted its strategic plan and really set the metric that we're trying to support, which is the 50% reduction of homelessness over the next 5 years. And so all of our actions are intended to be supportive of that numerical effort, and working regionally in collaboration with the county and other agencies in the region is a big part of our overall strategy. So all that is to say, we're here to present the core of the strategic plan, but at the same time, we've been doing implementation all along. So a lot of the things that we have listed in here, I think, will be familiar because we already have an MCU up and running, for example, the mobile crisis unit housed in the fire department. So just to conclude my introductory comments with the council's support tonight, with your feedback and any changes we make, we're planning to come back in March with a polished version, a complete strategic plan that will be designed so that it is easy to absorb the information and also include all of the background information, including a lot of the outreach that we've done and background information leading up to the creation of the plan. So with that overview, I'll turn it over to Teresa and Daisy to give the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and good evening, Mayor Stewart, members of the council. Before we move through this presentation this evening, we wanted to acknowledge and thank the service providers, the key stakeholders, the community members, and county staff that have contributed to the development of the city's first homelessness response strategic plan. We also wanted to acknowledge our former homelessness response manager, Kelsey Knockett, who played an integral role in laying the foundation for this plan and led the city's homelessness response efforts until the end of December. And I'd like to introduce Daisy Weiberg, who came aboard the city in October as our administrative specialist for homelessness response and is now acting in the role of our homelessness response manager. Daisy brings several years of experience running nonprofits focused on community development and food security, and we are very fortunate to have her and all of the work she's done to date so far. The agenda for tonight's study session includes a brief background on the strategic planning process to date, implementation updates since your study session in September, and an overview of the public engagement activities that Michael just spoke about that took place during the fall and winter. You've just missed an introductory slide in this slide so far. And once that context is provided, the proposed homelessness response strategic plan framework will be reviewed. We'll discuss the focus questions we prepared for this evening and wrap up with next steps. And now I'll turn it over to Daisy.
Thank you, Teresa. Good evening, Mayor Stewart and council members. The city and city council have continued to make preventing and addressing homelessness a key priority with our major city goals, as well as working to align ourselves with a countywide plan, which we will discuss more in a moment. In November of 2021, council received a presentation from the homelessness response manager providing direction for the strategic plan and establishing the 5 key components. In June of 2022, the county presented their plan to address homelessness to City Council, which was adopted by the Board of Supervisors in August of last year. Since our last City Council study session in September, we have been simultaneously implementing and developing the framework for our strategic plan, which brings us to tonight's study session. After working through the assessment, visioning, and strategy development stages of the strategic planning process, as you can see on this graphic, we are now entering the strategic plan rollout and transparency stage, which is highlighted with the orange arrow. With the hopeful adoption of our strategic plan in March, we will move fully into the implementation stage. As you will see throughout the strategic plan framework, our overarching objective is to align with the countywide plan to address homelessness. We see the county as the leader in our regional homelessness response efforts, and we want to position ourselves to support the lines of effort outlined in their plan to reduce homelessness by 50% by 2027. We are working to collaborate closely with the county's Homeless Services Division, and we reviewed the proposed framework with their team to ensure that the city's objectives and key tasks are in alignment with the countywide plan. We have presented this framework before, but we believe it is important to emphasize that the city's role in homelessness response is to connect individuals to services provided by our community partners and government agencies and housing provided by nonprofits and housing developers. We also want to highlight the central role that the county plays in implementing state programs, setting regional priorities, distributing federal and state funding resources, and delivering services including behavioral health, public health, social services, and drug and alcohol services that play an integral role in the city's homelessness response efforts. Since the last council study session in September, the strategy implementation process has revealed opportunities to increase effectiveness and highlighted immediate and long-term needs for the city's homelessness response efforts. Our CAMP standards continue to serve as an important internal tool for our field staff. The CAMP standards are operationalized through the city's GIS app, which launched in December, providing consistent outreach and enforcement protocols. The city's CAT and MCU teams continue to connect unhoused individuals with needed services and shelter referrals. We have been reviewing our 2022 field team data, and over the course of 2022, CAT engaged 523 individuals, with 139 electing to receive mental health services, and the MCU team made 478 contacts and helped facilitate 19 family reunifications. And that was since, I believe, April of 2022 when MCU came on board. In addition to our CAT and MCU teams, I also want to highlight our dedicated parks and recreation rangers and public works staff who support the city's homelessness response efforts. Lastly, building capacity and resiliency for service providers continues to be a priority for the city and the county, and ongoing stakeholder engagement plays a critical role in those efforts and the overall effectiveness of our strategic plan initiatives. In the fall of 2022, the city held feedback sessions with each of the key stakeholder groups highlighted in the blue boxes: homeless services providers, housing services providers, healthcare providers, activist groups, the business community, and faith-based groups. The feedback sessions provided opportunities for similarly situated stakeholders to share candidly and to provide constructive feedback on the key components and initiatives included in our strategic plan framework. 20 unhoused and unsheltered community members were individually surveyed at Shower the People and BMW's Blessed to Serve barbecue, providing invaluable feedback from their lived experience. The city also created a public survey to incorporate community feedback into the development of the strategic plan. 592 individuals participated in the survey. Of the total respondents, 11.7% responded that they had experienced homelessness, and 50% said that they knew a friend or family member who has experienced homelessness. Feedback from each of these public engagement efforts informed the framework that we will review tonight. Just to give you an overview, the framework is broken into sections highlighting each of the key components. Each component includes a main goal, 2 to 3 supporting objectives, several key tasks, and an overview of how we will recognize success. The framework is intended to be focused and actionable given the parameters of our 2-year plan. The 2-year timeline was intentionally established to allow for ongoing evaluation and adaptability to meet changing needs. While our initial 2-year plan aims to encompass the city and region's current priorities, other priorities and tasks will be included in future updates to the strategic plan in continued alignment with the county. Since this is the city's first homelessness response strategic plan, our focus in these first 2 years is to align with the countywide plan and to establish baseline data. And as Michael mentioned earlier, we've shifted from quantitative metrics to qualitative measures for recognizing success. And he also mentioned this earlier, just in terms of how we've shifted the metrics from having metrics drive our priorities to, from having the city's priorities inform our metrics rather than the metrics driving our efforts. So moving into the 5 key components that we'll be outlining in the strategic plan framework. They are communications, data, pilot programs, funding opportunities, and regional collaboration and engagement. These key components were reviewed by Council in November 2021 and serve as the foundation for the city's strategic plan to prevent and address homelessness. I'm going to briefly walk you through the framework for each of the components, and I'm happy to go into more detail afterwards if there are any questions about the specific key tasks. So, starting with communications, our goal is to enable equitable access to resources and increase transparency so that all community members are aware of efforts to address gaps in service and know where, how, when to reach out for assistance to address concerns related to homelessness. The 2 objectives we've outlined for this key component are to increase homelessness response communications and to communicate consistent homelessness response messaging across the region. We've outlined several key tasks for each of those objectives, which are described in detail in the full framework. Those tasks involve our homelessness response website, the city's Ask Slow app, developing an annual community forum, conducting an annual survey to gauge community awareness, creating property owner resources, updating and distributing our homelessness response pocket guide, streamlining regional communications, developing accessible resources for unhoused individuals, and incorporating regional resources on the city's website and communication channels. We will recognize success in this area of communications when our community members know where to go for information and resources related to homelessness. The county is widely recognized as the leader in regional homelessness response efforts. Effective talking points are consistently shared across our city and region, and unhoused individuals are clear about service capacity and where to obtain services. Moving on to data, our goal for this key component area is to streamline internal and external data collection processes to enable timely and effective coordination of homelessness response efforts and provide analysis to inform best practices. The 3 objectives we've outlined for this component are to utilize a shared data platform, to increase data sharing between agencies, and to increase transparency of affordable housing inventory and make data more accessible to service providers and regional partners. Some of the key tasks we've highlighted in the data objectives include our encampment management app and its referral capabilities, shared data findings to inform the county's data management process, coordinated encampment visits with the county, making affordable housing data more accessible, and promoting regional programs such as Section 8 vouchers to property owners. We will recognize success in the area of data when information is shared more efficiently, increasing the placement of unhoused individuals into temporary or permanent housing, when shared data resources make it easier for outreach professionals to routinely make successful referrals connecting unhoused individuals with services, when city staff and regional partners share a tool for data entry that ensures consistency and improves outcomes across the region, and when encampment cleanups and outreach efforts are coordinated regionally. Next up is pilot programs, and our goal for this key component is to collaborate with the county to develop scalable and replicable programs to connect those experiencing homelessness to a variety of shelter and housing options through timely outreach and advocate for county implementation of successful programs. The 3 main objectives we've outlined for pilot programs are to expand a hotel voucher program in collaboration with the county to ensure a bridge for temporary emergency shelters in place, to coordinate with county to develop and implement pilot programs, and to identify and support new pilot program opportunities to develop shelter and housing for chronically homeless and medically vulnerable individuals and families. Our key tasks for pilot programs include implementing the hotel voucher program, continuing to operate and support the city's CAT and MCU teams, developing pilot programs in coordination with the county to ensure long-term sustainability and implementation, strengthening key stakeholder partnerships, and researching and implementing new pilot programs to provide emergency and transitional shelter. We will recognize success in this area when pilot programs are developed and implemented in collaboration with the county and achieve long-term sustainability.
Let me turn this one off.
Sorry about that. Okay, the next section is funding opportunities. And our goal in this area is to proactively seek funding opportunities to meet localized needs as aligned with regional goals to prevent and address homelessness. The three objectives we've outlined for funding opportunities are to strategically apply for funding opportunities in coordination with the county and nonprofits, to support efforts to establish emergency and transitional housing for chronically homeless and medically vulnerable individuals and families, and to leverage resources to develop a more robust regional service delivery system. The key tasks we want to highlight for funding opportunities are developing strategic funding opportunities with the county and regional partners, partnering with housing developers and homeless services providers on new transitional housing resources, advocating for skilled nursing facilities and more recuperative care programs within the county, and participating in regional efforts to provide recommendations for effective resource allocation. We will recognize success in the area of funding opportunities when the county uses its established metrics to guide actions and confirm the positive impact of regional efforts to reduce homelessness, when the city reaches KPI targets for affordable housing production and implements successful transitional housing projects to help bridge the gap between temporary and permanent housing solutions, and when the city collaborates with county and regional partners on funding opportunities and receives funding for regional efforts. Our last key component is regional collaboration and engagement, and our goal for this area is to coordinate with the county to engage regional partners in collaborative efforts to improve the effective use of resources and promote proven best practices. The three objectives we've outlined for this key component are to work with the county's homeless services team to establish and support regional priorities and implement strategies in alignment with shared regional goals, to strengthen relationships with key stakeholders, to coordinate regional encampment, outreach, and cleanup efforts with the county, service providers, and regional partners. The key tasks for regional collaboration and engagement are policy and program alignment with the city and county's strategic plans, consistent KPIs to measure impact across the region, ongoing and intentional key stakeholder engagement, enhanced programs and services for the downtown business community, and advocating for more diverse shelter options to house individuals and reduce the number of encampments. Based on feedback from a council member, we have modified outcome number 3, which you'll see reflected in gold on this slide. Our regional collaboration engagement measures for ways we'll recognize success are regional priorities, strategies, and resources are established by the county and consistently communicated to regional agencies and evaluated to ensure effective implementation. Identified key stakeholder groups are consistently and intentionally engaged. The number of people inhabiting encampments and experiencing homelessness on downtown streets is reduced, and encampment outreach, referral, and cleanup efforts are coordinated regionally. That concludes our high-level review of the strategic plan framework, and I would now like to direct Council's attention to our 3 focus questions, which are, does Council concur with the proposed goals, objectives, and key tasks for each component? Does Council recommend any additions or alternatives to the proposed measures for recognizing success? And does Council concur with a qualitative format for recognizing success? We will be incorporating council and community feedback from tonight's study session into the final version of the strategic plan, as Michael mentioned, which will be presented for adoption on March 21st. The comprehensive plan will feature additional content, including vision, background information, survey, and feedback session data, and supporting appendices. But the primary focus of the plan will be the framework that we have presented tonight. So that concludes our study session presentation, but I would like to direct any community members who are interested in learning more about the city's homelessness response efforts to visit our website, which features resources for at-risk community members, unhoused and unsheltered community members, property owners, and helpers. And I'll now return to our focus questions for feedback from council and the community.
Thank you, and thank you for all of this hard work and coming back to, I think Michael said the third time or fourth time at this point. I feel like we've been talking about this a lot, so I'm sorry I'm losing the amount of times. So many questions, but I will let my colleagues start first. Who would like to ask questions? Councilmember Pease.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the layers of depth that we're seeing each time. I think that there's a lot of great coordination in terms of the communication, the data. So a couple of questions. One, there was a task about an annual community forum, and I was wondering what your vision is for that, and if that's a city thing or a county regional partner thing.
Yeah, that is something that we added as it's a key task under Objective 1 under communications. So the overarching objective is to increase homelessness response communications. And the idea around that was to collaborate with service providers, the county, and other regional partners to co-facilitate an annual community forum focused on homelessness and local response resources. We've talked about the idea with the county and with CAPSLO in terms of collaborating on that forum, bringing in community members to be able to answer questions, have potentially breakout groups. That was a lot of the feedback that we heard from specifically the downtown business community, was that they were wanting more dialogue. They were wanting to be able to hear directly from city leadership, from the police department, and that was something that came out of one of those feedback sessions, was the idea for having a community forum just to facilitate more conversation and transparency between city and service providers, and also involving the county, or at least having them present at that. We would definitely be leading that and focusing it on city efforts, at least to start, but wanted the county's presence at that. So have at least talked about the idea with the county and with CAPSLO and have their full support.
So kind of an intentional centralizing rather than the scattershot that I'm sure a lot of folks end up not getting a big picture all at the same time.
Right,
So,
and in some ways
okay.
building off of the community forum idea, but narrowing that down and spending more time in intentional conversation around homelessness response.
All right. The task about pilot programs, and this is kind of queuing up for a question to ask of my colleagues, but it seems that at this point, whereas when we started this process, it was very much about pilot programs. Now it feels like it's programs. Some of them will be pilot programs. Some of them somebody else had as a pilot program, but this is really our opportunity to do some of the work that's part of the county strategic plan and what is ours, that we're taking on in-house, as it were. So am I missing anything? Do you see a critical reason why it should be a pilot program versus just, this is kind of what we do, these are our programs?
Yes, good question. We've had a lot of conversation about this, really defining our pilot programs. We as we learn and implement these programs, the idea, of course, is to scale them, replicate them, have them work for the region. Examples are CAT, it's being operationalized at the county level. Now we're working with our MCU, and we're getting data. We're learning a lot about how that runs, and we showcasing that, in terms of successes for our other regional partners. And it's also, these programs provide us a space in our strategic planning to
try and evolve some of these strategies, such as safe parking. We're constantly trying to learn how to do that and see if we can continue that in various forms in the city. So it's programs we continue to implement, and it's also programs we're learning and trying to scale up.
One other thing to add, in our conversation with the county reviewing this framework, that was definitely a section that we talked about, and the feedback that we heard from them and incorporated into this was that they wanted to be part of the idea generation process with pilot programs, not just the city coming up with a pilot program and then after the fact bringing it to them and asking them to adopt it, but having more of a collaborative approach from the start. And so that was something that we heard and changed the way that we worded that goal and even some of the objectives based on that to, again, really want to honor that regional collaboration and the idea around pilot programs, that we are piloting them to show the efficacy of them and then hoping that the county will adopt them and implement those regionally, but wanting to, if that is our expectation, we want to include the county in the kind of the idea implementation process.
Madam Mayor, I think, our hope is that with some of these programs that, these are programs that we've, borrowed, replicated from other communities that have shown outcomes. And so we're hoping that these are replicated and we're leading from the front. I think that we're showing and exercising regional leadership. And we're hoping that the county will look at these and say, look at these outcomes. We really want to be outcome focused, and we think the MCU program has shown some admirable outcomes. We think of CAT, we think that our partnership with Capslo, and I'm glad to see that Jack's here tonight because he's been an amazing partner with us on many different programs. And just last week, we were looking at a new innovative program for pallet structures. So I think, some will be pilot programs that we hope that we can lead and then partner with the state or the county, and that they can replicate and then replace perhaps funding here at the city level.
Okay, so we'll have. Anyway, it seems like some of the pallet structures is not our pilot program, right? So anyway, that's kind of my point, that there's going to be a mix. So awesome that we're. So that's fine. We can talk about that. And then in terms of the data, it sounds like that we've done a lot of work in-house because we couldn't really wait for the county to a certain extent. But in general, we're hoping that the county takes the lead on being able to have that coordination across all these agencies, et cetera. Is that correct? So we're going to kind of be able to keep working with what we have and need, but otherwise cool our heels and let them do what they need to do. Is that fair?
That's very fair, and they are well aware of our efforts, and they may utilize it for a bridge temporarily or not, but they are, and should be the maker of the regional data system.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Francis.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful presentation. I really appreciate all of the hard work you all put in. Actually, Councilmember Pease brought up kind of an interesting point, how we are hoping to hand off some of these pieces or join in with the county on some of these pieces. And you did a really nice job alluding to this at the beginning of the presentation, but I think just for the sake of the public, it might be useful to zoom back out for a second just to remind everybody why all this collaboration and advocacy to the county is so important. And if you could just kind of delineate again the role of the city versus the role of the county and what we're hoping to accomplish, and then what we're really hoping that our county partners are going to help us accomplish.
I'm happy to take that one.
Thank you.
So the city's role here is as we're the agency in terms of our jurisdiction. We've got people on the ground that are engaging, but we need help. We can't do that alone. We're not a social service agency. And what we've learned through this process is that the county is situated as a subdivision of the state with all the money for mental health, behavioral health, and programs that can be targeted to the population to achieve what the goals are that they've established. So our strategy is to support the county's success because they're best positioned to put the resources in place to accomplish these things that we're hoping for. Pilot programs is a strategy, and it's just that, it's a strategy to try on a small scale to show efficacy so that the county, who has the ability to scale things up, may choose to do that. Other, agencies may see, hey, this is working really good and slow. We'd like to do that. Can you help us? And that's happened with CAT, where we were the first agency years ago to start the CAT program, and now that's something that's funded by the county. One of our CAT officers is funded through the county program, and we have a second one as well. So the big picture is that if the county steps forward and leads, they'll bring everybody along, and we want to do everything that we can to encourage that, support their success, while doing other things too, right? There's always going to be things that our jurisdiction wants to do for our jurisdiction, but I think to the extent that we keep in mind that we want to perform these programs in a way that they can be picked up and replicated elsewhere, that it'll be more effective.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And while I have you, one of the things that I would really love for you to highlight as we went through this plan and we were talking about some of the progress that's been made, and you all were highlighting that we're in the stage of putting a lot of this stuff into place. It's already on the ground. I would love for you to talk a little bit about the home key application and what that's going to mean for the community, and also just kind of a big picture. Is it my understanding there's over 100 units for targeted unhoused individuals in the pipeline through Haslow right now? Just to kind of give a little bit of a picture of some of the good things that are already coming.
Absolutely. There are a lot of efforts in play right now that address different parts of the spectrum of service for unhoused individuals in our community. And so a project like Home Key is one that can really help bridge between people living in encampments or in a congregate shelter to sort of graduate to a next level of housing before they're ready to move into permanent housing, which we're also working on as well. So you mentioned Haslow. There are over 100 housing units, permanent housing units in the pipeline right now that will serve formerly unhoused residents. That's a pipeline that's going to take 3 to 5 years to fully develop. But those are projects that are actually required now by virtue of funding from the State Department of Housing and Community Development. So as more affordable housing projects come forward, even more of those units will be set aside. So the more we do projects with our partners like Haslow, People's Self-Help Housing Corporation, we're going to be meeting our regional housing need allocation number for very low income units, but also the extremely low income units, which are these units for unhoused individuals.
Thank you so much for that piece of really good news.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. And I think also as we talk about that kind of the purviews and where everything's going, I do want to just make sure to highlight that the city manager and I had a great meeting with Supervisor Gibson. Then I've been meeting also with Supervisors Ortiz, Legg, and Paulding, and looking at the county. They're really working with CSAC, the County Supervisors of California, official initials, but and they are creating really a framework similar to what we're creating, but at the higher level to really advocate at the state level, and so that the county is really being that regional leader. And we're happy to have been a leader in this process up until, but happy to also give them back their reins and say, let's do this together as in best practices and going forward. So just kind of wanted to tie that in there. Did you have something?
No, I was just going to say that I think I'm encouraged by some of the conversations and some of the things coming out of CSAC. That conversation with Supervisor Gibson, we got probably, I would say, the most comprehensive, I would say, compendia of funding resources for homeless services. Pretty excited about that. And I do think that between tonight's discussion and the conversations that we're having with the county, that this will really start to culminate in really some efforts that should start to see us cooperating on some real key initiatives that really move the needle. We've got to do it. And I think, I'm encouraged by some of those conversations. I'm heartened to see that the board the board of supervisors has adopted this as a budget priority. And so those, and I imagine that, as part of our legislative discussion coming up, that we will continue to be advocating at the Board of Supervisors and trying to optimize the partnerships wherever we can.
Thank you. Councilmember Shorsman.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of questions. I won't drag this out too long. I just wanted to ask a little bit about some of the measures. Some of them are more quantitative, and as you mentioned, some of them are more qualitative. On the ones that are quantitative, that reference numbers in particular, one of the examples I think was number of people inhabiting encampments is reduced. So for each of those that sort of have a numeric reference, do we have a baseline number that we can start from so that we make sure that we can actually see that things have reduced or what the impact has been?
That is partly why we have, again, shied away from the firmer metrics, because we're still developing those baseline metrics. But I know on that one, we would at least initially be using the data that our field teams have from their encampment outreach efforts. Even though we have just launched our formal app, the GIS app, in December, they've been tracking their encampment outreach efforts kind of on an ongoing basis. So we have data from 2022 for the Rangers, Public Works, CAT, and MCU. And so that could be used as baseline data. And then I think moving forward, we'd have more robust and reliable data through our app. But that would be kind of the initial baseline.
Okay, and then following up on that with the qualitative measures, one of the things about qualitative measures that make it hard to be able to know when you're done is that they are qualitative, right? So you don't necessarily, some of the answers of whether or not you've completed an item can be a little subjective, or maybe some of the action items that you would get to, that you would do in order to answer that metric aren't necessarily things that we as a city might accomplish. There were some that were around, in the communications area, around general understanding of residents of access to resources around homelessness and knowing, where to refer people to. And so it's more of a general concept than it is something that you can really say you've done and checked the box. So how do we plan to approach that and know when, or have some sort of way of saying when we've completed that action?
Yeah, on that one specifically, we are planning to conduct our annual survey. So we did our baseline survey in the fall, which had 592 respondents, and our plan is to continue that on an annual basis to at least gauge community awareness. So while it wouldn't be maybe as exact as some, again, other data metrics, it would give us at least an idea of the general awareness level from the community in terms of what service providers they're aware of. That was one of the questions on our initial survey, if they had heard of 40 Prado and the CAT team and MCU. And so one way would be to gauge kind of our baseline data from the initial survey to subsequent surveys. And I don't know if Teresa or Michael have anything to add on that, but that was one of the ideas that we had for measuring, and even though it's kind of somewhat of a gray area, but still being able to measure some growth in terms of our communication efforts and being able to look at our website engagement. We've built out our website, and so in the full plan, we will be including some firmer metrics as an appendix. We just wanted to shift the focus away from that, realizing this is the city's first homelessness response strategic plan, and we really wanted, to focus more on those qualitative, bigger picture kind of shifts that we're hoping to see, while also realizing there's importance for having metrics and ways to measure our success. And that's definitely something that we want to work towards. We just feel like in these first 2 years, it's more establishing that baseline data. And then in the subsequent 2-year plan or updates to the plan, we would be able to zero in more on those key metrics.
So that's great. I'm glad you've given some thought to how you could actually document some of these things, because, people leave, they move on, and then you lose that institutional knowledge or that history that's been made. And so I'm glad you've thought about that and are working on ways to do it. I'm also really happy to hear that the county seems engaged in the pilot project process. It sounds like they are willing to not only maybe implement some things that we've done or that others have done, but that they're engaged in the process of coming up with new ideas. Have they expressed, and I know you can't speak to what they're going to do yet, but has there been an expressed interest in any of the pilot projects that we've done so far?
Just the immediate recent conversation we've had was on the data app, and we talked a lot about that and how that may act as a bridge for them until they develop a robust app. So, and we just developed that in-house and based on our field team needs and our communication needs and our data collection needs. And so that's just one recent example. I think the communication piece and the regional collaboration piece is so important, even though it's been happening for a while. It's formalized now. It's in the countywide plan. It's in the plan before you. And those constant discussions continually reveal opportunities. And so I'm very confident we'll be able to show them things that work and things that don't work, and that they'll be able to do the same with us, and that we'll be able to collaborate a lot more on pilots going forward.
Madam Mayor, if I could just hop in, if I could maybe invite Chief Tuggle. I know he had some conversations with Vince Perucci over at the county about our MCU program. And so maybe he can come up and share some of those, because we're trying to socialize some of the outcomes related to that program. And Chief Tuggle and I met earlier this week. I think there was some encouraging conversations around that. So Chief, if you could just maybe relay some of that.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the moment. Yes, so in line with the county's plan in general of increasing the amount of services, things like sobering centers, detox centers, crisis, the CSU. I'm drawing that one right there, crisis stabilization unit. In addition to those types of resources, there is an effort on the EMSA side to encourage that development for the purposes of increasing certain levels of care that fall under the EMSA authority. Those actually match up fairly well with some of the resources that we could put into place via the MCU. Those are also in the action plan. They're actually denoted specifically. So by increasing those resources, it actually opens up the door for other opportunities which have some synergy with the things we're trying. So those pilot programs that we're working on will dovetail very nicely into some of the broader projects going on within the county. If you have any other questions, I'm available.
That's really great news. Thank you so much. And
Absolutely.
Just to close, Daisy, thank you so much for picking up the reins. Kelsey left big shoes to fill, and you just jumped right in, and really appreciate that.
Since our mayor is momentarily not here as vice mayor, I will continue the meeting. Are there any further questions? All right, then it's time for public comment. Have you received any public comment requests?
Yes, we have 3 public comments. Jack Leahy, Bettina Swigger, and Ethan Gutterman.
Thank you. And now that our mayor has returned, I will go back to being vice mayor.
Good evening. Mayor Stewart, council members, thank you for holding this study session. Before I dive into some of my comments, I really just want to applaud Michael, Teresa, Daisy, Derek, Kelsey, maybe she's watching, for all the hard work that went into this plan. I was lucky enough to see a lot of the drafts as they were coming through, so it's really great to see it evolve over time and really respond to the community need. I just wanted to give some numbers of context of kind of what we're seeing in terms of service utilization at Capslow. Being in January, or these numbers are from January, I get a clean slate to see kind of what our numbers look like in 1 month. We have 321 households engaged in services right now, and 171 who've received sheltering services. We have 47 households in our safe parking services at Railroad Safe Parking with an average of 7 per night. 65 households in case management, 7 in recovery care. So those are a lot of kind of random numbers there, but really the big numbers that I look at are we've housed 5 households in case management. We've housed 2 households out of Railroad Safe Parking where they originated in their service trajectory. And with all those numbers, it's still not enough. We have been over capacity and had to turn 21 households away from sheltering services over the past month. And during the storm and warming center, we had 19 nights of warming center, which was amazing for us. It was one of our biggest months we've ever had. Thank you, Daisy, Councilmember Pease, and Mayor Stewart for coming in and helping out on warming center. We served an average of 20 to 5 individuals per night. I believe that this plan, coupled with the county plan, really allow us to shore up some of the major gaps that we're seeing right now. One statistic that I didn't mention is we on average see about 5 to 6 families per month. Right now we have 10 families that we're working with. I think that the focus on unique subpopulations is going to be incredibly helpful, and then that will allow us to really address some of the issues we see at Prado in terms of trying to serve very unique populations all the time. And one thing I do want to highlight with 10 seconds left is the coordination with a county plan is critical. There's systems like HMIS and coordinated entry that can be easily tapped into to serve a lot of the goals here. So I'm being dinged off, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We appreciate all your information.
Good evening, Mayor, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Bettina Swigger. I'm the CEO of Downtown SLO, the nonprofit organization that partners with the city to foster an economically vibrant downtown. Our organization represents more than 500 businesses. I also serve on the county's Homeless Services Oversight Council, or HSOC. Outside of encampments, the challenges of homelessness are most visible downtown. Unfortunately, downtown sees the negative effects of homelessness every single day. People are struggling, we know this, and their struggles can negatively impact our businesses and the perception of safety downtown. This can include mental health crises, aggressive behavior, urine and feces on our sidewalks, and we have a lot of compassion for unhoused individuals. Our team does their best to support these folks on their journey out of homelessness. But we also recognize that it's going to take a significant regional effort, and I'm very gratified to hear about these new connections that are being formed with the county. I'd like to applaud the city staff for their outreach efforts during this planning process. They've had regular contact with our staff and our committees, and they've had really hard conversations with many downtown businesses and downtown stakeholders. In the draft plan, section 5.1 identifies regional collaboration and calls for collaboration with Downtown SLO, specifically our ambassadors and our Clean and Safe program. So I just want to tell you a little bit about that. We have currently 3 full-time uniformed ambassadors who work 7 days a week, and they're out there greeting people, welcoming them to downtown, cleaning and maintaining the sidewalks, and having contacts with unhoused individuals. We have a small contract with the City of SLO to support this program, and as a nonprofit, we are always accepting donations to support this program should anybody in the public listening want to make a contribution. And because we all love metrics, I want to just throw some numbers at you. Since the beginning of the fiscal year, July 1st, 2022, our ambassadors downtown have had 695 interactions with unhoused individuals. They have performed 315 wellness checks, and they've de-escalated 70 situations, just to name a few data points. So based on our small program and what we know about the impact of clean and safe programs that are similar in other communities, We'd like to grow this program with more ambassadors and help contribute more to the solutions-based approach that we have to dealing with people moving out of homelessness. Additional resources would allow us, of course, to do a better job with this and to help the downtown business community and the heart of our city. I also want to say thank you to the police department and the CAT, and especially the mobile crisis unit at the fire department. Thank you for your attention to this complex issue. We look forward to working with you as it keeps going.
Thank you.
Thank you, council and city staff, for this really exhaustive presentation. I think it was really great. I think it's a good start. I was just confused why the words permanent supportive housing were never mentioned in the document. That is like the linchpin in all the academia around homelessness policy and housing outreach. It's permanent supportive housing. That's what people need. And that was not mentioned once in this proposal. When I experienced homelessness myself, that was what I was missing, what my family was missing. It was a spousal dispute situation, an abusive father and a scared mother that was relying on the father or my mom was relying on my dad for economic support. So she didn't really have nowhere to go. So thank God we had the privilege of having relatives nearby, but we were immigrants, or whether from another country or within our own country. If we didn't have a support network around us, we would have ended up on the street. So is there any way the city can work with the county or other governments or other government entities to create that kind of emergency housing for community members that may at one point be perfectly housed and not even be underhoused or rent and burned or anything, but there's no emergency housing protocol? And I was also confused why the city hasn't considered reaching out for its own funding mechanisms. I know, for example, the HOME, H-O-M-E investment program offered by HUD is designed for localities to do this kind of work themselves, not needing a county government to kind of assist in any way. It's specifically tailored for localities, small cities like SLO, that don't have the economic power that San Francisco or Los Angeles have to kind of just do whatever they want. This program is specifically designed for smaller cities like our own. So thank you. And I think the outreach parts of this plan are really amazing. Gathering at Food Not Bombs at Mitchell Park 1 to 3 every Sunday. When we talk to people experiencing homelessness about these issues, they say that not having the face of the city to them is a police officer, which is not always the most friendly to someone experiencing homelessness. So I think expanding non-armed staff members, whether that be an MCU or a CAT member or just like a community development SLO city staffer going out to ask them questions about how they're feeling about housing, I think that's a step in the right direction. So I applaud council and staff on that movement. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any other comments?
No, there are not.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I had to step out earlier before I was choking, but I did have actually just a couple questions before we jump into deliberations. As far as on page 41, attachment A, the objective 2, and I know we're talking about high level on all of this, and I guess would love to have a little bit more information around how the county being widely recognized is our measurement. I know we were talking a little bit earlier with Councilmember Shorsman's comments. That is just one that it's earlier in this document and here that I just thought, how do we put that in here as our measurable outcome? It's page 41. It's in the measurable outcomes 1.2, number 2. Or
it's under communication, right?
Yeah. Or it's on page 472, table 2. It says the same thing. We'll recognize success when
the county is widely recognized as a leader. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this is very, similar to Councilmember Shorsman's question, and it's a little more complicated because we really are needing to, support the countywide plan, and when their metrics are working, that our metrics are working. So we've talked in communications, for example, we ran across quite often folks that just didn't know where to go to figure out how to help or where to go to find certain resources. And so we're talking to their communications team with our, communications team in terms of making sure that we're sharing, consistent resources on our websites and as things are developed. So, will we know when our community members know where to go for information related to resources? I think that, we can look at it's on our website. We can hear what they're telling us, and if they're finding information easily, or if they're still, not, then we're going to know. And so it's a perfect example of a more qualitative measure as we develop our data systems out and continue our county collaboration and with their communications team.
Thank you. And then the only other thing was the KPIs on attachment A 5.1 key task 2. I guess I'm just trying to figure out where the KPIs come from. Are they standard practices that are KPIs from the county or the state or something else, or from our own created KPIs? Key performance indicators, sorry. Thank you. And it's page 488, if that's of any help. Sorry.
Thank you. Yes, this is a good one. Yeah, key performance indicators to measure progress in connecting unhoused individuals with services and housing opportunities. This will be using our data app. We'll be talking to the county, and you can hear, we made this many touches or this many outreach contacts from our partners, and we're cataloging that with our app. The county's cataloging that in their data apps, and that this sharing, we can, they're established through, outreach contacts, who's going into services, who's going into, housing. And that's basically this. A fine example of what you've heard tonight is an example of how we'll track those. Typically, these are tracked through, our housing arena numbers, but this will be tracked differently through this homelessness strategic plan effort.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, before I make my comments, I just wanted to ask, maybe, I don't know if Michael or Derek wanted to comment about the pursuit of funding that our public commenter mentioned, and talk about what we've done so far and what we're looking at.
Yeah, happy to do that. Michael could probably come up and talk about home funding, which, we use home funds all the time. And then we can talk about the projects that we have in the pipeline, the 100 units, 400 total, that are all combined with, supportive services.
Right. So in terms of both the home program and the community development block grant, we are part of the urban county. So we do get our own allocation of funding. However, we've determined that it's best to join forces and save on the administration component by having one program administered by the county that we can apply for our own projects for as well. And so we have accessed home funding in the past. Oftentimes there's, one big regional project that the home funding goes to. We're giving money, for like a Moylan Terrace type project, for example, where there was home funds, there was city funds, there was every type of funding needs to be consolidated to go into a project like that. So we do take advantage of those funds. We've analyzed Go It Alone in the past and determined that it isn't the best approach for us. But in terms of the permanent supportive housing, that is really the housing that we are supporting with our construction of with our Affordable Housing Fund and through our nonprofit partners. And we're going to look at more ways to produce that type of housing. I think when we recently updated the inclusionary housing ordinance, heard from the city council and heard from the community that this program alone isn't producing enough housing to meet our regional housing need allocation, and that there's a pretty high burden too in terms of maybe some trade-offs on development that we would want to see that maybe, those programs create hurdles. And so we're looking at programs that convert existing market rate housing to affordable housing as something potentially to pursue over the next couple of years, and other types of funding sources that may help us create more of the whole spectrum of housing. So it's really, we're thinking about it as the complete spectrum from the encampment through to permanent housing, and trying to see where we can implement individual projects like through HomeKey. Project HomeKey, state funds could come and allow us to acquire a hotel where there would be permanent supportive housing, potentially for families that are currently occupying 40 Prado, which complicates intake and takes up a lot of space at 40 Prado. So if there's a strategy where we can find another solution with a different type of housing for families that has the potential of both lowering barriers to entry for Prado and creating more space. So these are some of the strategies within the strategy. Maybe the document is high level, but it supports our efforts to drill down and accomplish these individual projects that we hope will really make a difference.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I also wanted to mention to our commenter about our legislative platform that, not only are we trying to build this type, we're the city, we don't build housing, right? I have to channel former Councilmember Christensen when I say that. We don't build housing ourselves, but we try to promote the building of that type of housing through our ordinances and other ways that we can do that. But it's also something that we advocate for with our other elected representatives at the state and federal level to try and help provide us the funding to build more of that permanent supportive housing. And the other thing we also need that I know is mentioned in our legislative platform is skilled and assisted living for aging individuals that are homeless. That has been a big issue, I think, at 40 Prado in the recent past, and I know it's specifically mentioned in our legislative platform. So stepping back, I guess my feedback on the document, it's a really well thought out document. It had good bones sort of to begin with the first time that we saw it around, and it's gotten better. I'm glad to see some of the feedback that we gave the last time was about some of the measures and how we needed to clarify them a little bit more. And I see that they are still not perfect. They still are, some of them are a little rough around the edges, but from your responses, I can tell that you're giving some thought to how we can check those boxes and actually show that we're making progress on them. So I appreciate that. This may seem like a small thing, but we've been talking this whole time about how the county now, is showing that they are making this a priority themselves and wanting to take the lead on this as they should, since they are the ones that get a majority of the public health, mental health, housing funds, DSS from the state through to the county. So I'm glad that we're all talking about collaboration, but I would even recommend maybe moving that item up in the list. Communication right now is the first one on the list. Collaboration, if not being the number one, should be the second, I think, because that's the key to all of this going forward. I think my understanding, I wasn't on the council when a lot of these pilot projects, the MCU and the CAT, were created, but the idea was that we would try these things out. We would be the incubator, and then we would hopefully at some point be less of a provider and more of a support entity for these and other types of programs. So that we can use our funds to move on to other priorities within the city. Not that I think we will ever get out of the business of supporting our unhoused residents, and I don't think that we should get out of that business. But I think the idea was to kind of incubate these programs and then try to send them off to a larger scale entity that could afford to kind of keep going and keeping them going and had the funding to do that. So that's sort of my big picture, I think, takeaway. And collaboration. We should be an entity that supports the county's efforts and works with other jurisdictions within the county to make our wider regional efforts happen. And so that should be over and over again emphasized in the document.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Marks.
Thank you. Yeah, I just have a few comments. So first of all, I think this is a fantastic document, and it makes me feel hopeful. And I have to admit that sometimes I feel hopeless when I think about this particular problem, homelessness or being unhoused. So I'm encouraged. My question, and this is really more for the county than for us, is whether they're going to ramp up their staffing so they can actually apply for these grants and then handle the grant monies. I've heard repeatedly from attending Board of Supervisors meetings and also listening to them that, we're not applying for this grant, we're not applying for that grant, because if we did get the money, we don't have the staff to actually properly manage it. They were saying that the meeting, the first full meeting of the new Board of Supervisors. So I'm not quite sure how we can encourage them, or how anybody can encourage them to actually get the staffing that they need, the grant writing that they need to acquire the funds, administer the funds, and truly be the center the center pole of the circus tent, whatever you want to call it. That we're saying, oh, this is what the county needs to do. Well, how can we advocate? And that's not really a question. It's more of a comment that I think we need to advocate with the county to beef up their staffing in this particular area so that they can be effective. And I want to thank you for including the alteration in the outcome on 5.2 to include the downtown streets. But I think having suggested that alteration during the agenda review this morning, I was referring to streets in general, not just the downtown street. So I'd like to just say city streets. I can just speak from my neighborhood in San Luis Ranch. There are all kinds of people sleeping on the sidewalks in various places. And sometimes it's the same people, sometimes it's new people. But it's not only the downtown. I understand that the downtown has a special place in our hearts and in our economy and our regional identity or sense of place. So I wouldn't want to detract from helping the downtown. But in fact, this is happening in neighborhoods. It's happening all over the city. And so the people who are, this is my assumption, the people who are sleeping on the streets who are not part of encampments are so alienated from communities that they're not even in an encampment. They're just all by themselves. And my heart goes out to them, but at the same time, it makes the general public experience feelings of somehow being threatened or being uncertain. What is this person going to do if I walk by this person? I don't know. So it's creating a sense of lack of safety. So anyway, I would say that would be a success measure, as well as reducing, not numerically, but just reducing the number of people in encampments. That may even be hard to calculate because these encampments get bigger, they get smaller, they move around, they get together, they split apart. Human nature, really, a lot of it. So anyway, that's all I have to say. And I think the idea of pilot programs, that we can be an incubator, I think it's because the city has taken the lead out of its sense of default because nobody else was doing it. And I think our city residents and city staff and this council are interested in new ideas, interested in trying stuff out and like that. And so by pilot programs, I'm assuming that this would be like a 1-year thing or a 2-year thing. It's limited in time. So anyway, more power to you. Thank you very much. And that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Councilmember Pease.
Thank you, and I appreciate the colleagues' remarks so far, and thank you again to staff and all of our collaborative community. I think the only things that I would add at this point, one, I was excited to see the task about, I think it's maybe under data, but about affordable housing inventory, having more transparency, being able to, every now and then I'll get, random calls like, so do you have a 1-bedroom unit? Because we architecturally worked on affordable housing. So folks are having to make like individual phone calls to be able to see if they can get on lists. There's not quite that nexus. So I do think that the more that we can kind of keep that transition going, I do, I think that program, the more that we can align with what the county is already kind of committed to doing, the better. And so in the county plan, they have, a plan for 300 of these kind of interim housing, the tiny cabin model, for example, and then, looking at some other supportive housing. And they've got a lot of numbers in here. And so I think that, that's part of our alignment. But that's also why I'm thinking programs as that task. And within that, one of the objectives is pilot programs, because pilot programs do serve this really important role. But at the same time, I don't want us to pretend that all of everything that we do for our unhoused individuals are going to be adopted by the county and taken up, right? Some of them are going to be ours. And so I think that's why I would be interested in seeing that one be, programs and pilot programs as part of that.
Thank you. I agree with that. Programs kind of heading, it does make sense that some things will be underneath it. It'll be pilot that might be taken on, might be ours, or might be let go, because that's what a pilot program is. You try something, go, that doesn't work. Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, thank you. Most of what I wanted to say has already been said by my colleagues, but I just wanted to say thank you again. This is an absolutely overwhelming problem, and it's devastating. It's an emergency. It feels like it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and we need to help our neighbors who are unhoused. But it actually is feeling like we're making real progress, and that's the thing that kind of I'm taking away from tonight. We're looking back at the programs that are in place, at the housing units that are in progress, and all of the pilot programs that have seen success, and it feels like we're actually making a difference, and that is just incredible. So wanted to say thank you, and in the focus questions, largely agree with some of the comments that have been made, and happy with what I'm seeing in this program. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I will say ditto to all of my colleagues, so you can just kind of include all that again. And I would love, doesn't have to happen now, but would love to see the feedback sessions list, because I wonder sometimes if there are people that are missing from that list. There's people that come to me and say, how come I wasn't involved in the interfaith list? I'm like, I don't even know who's on that list. So, I'm happy to connect you. So just trying to figure out how to help in that collaboration concept, really getting all of the people who want to be collaborative partners with us, I think would be important. I just will end with that. I'll reiterate I totally appreciate his strategy overall framework. And I also do still think that having the county's success be our metric is a concern. And I just think there's a different way maybe we could say it. But obviously we want them to become the leaders of the whole region. I know all of us as the cities are working on homelessness, and we're all working on this together. And I may have missed it, so I apologize. There's been a lot with budget reading. On the preventive side, I'm not sure kind of where this fits in. You know, I had someone tell me about how their landlord increased their rent, and now they're probably going to end up homeless if they can't figure out something. And so looking at that prevention side of things, as well as the, because the reduction won't happen if new people end up homeless, even if you help someone else that's unhoused right now. So that's what I'm looking at, is how does that prevention and reduction happen? And I do look forward to future more specific metrics when we have a little bit more regional connection. Fully agree with Councilmember Shorsman on the recuperative care. You know, seeing at 40 Prado just this last month, and the people who are in wheelchairs and casts and in temporary ways, that if we had places for them to go and actually recuperate, would they heal quicker, faster, better? Probably it's very important. And sorry, one more thing. I'm just got to get back to that. Oh, and then just as far as I'm looking forward to seeing how all the data connects. I know the HMIS and county, I appreciate the app you're talking about from the city. I also feel like there's some, you know, the point in time count that we happen, you know, that we do every 2 years. Then there's numerous people seem to have their own interesting data, spreadsheets and whatnot. So I really appreciate looking forward to seeing how that's all going to come together. And I think that will be absolutely fantastic. So, and I think the 50% reduction, I think, yes, we should work in concert with the county completely, but kind of going back to that prevention reduction concern around, like, I also worry about us hanging our hat on that exact metric. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that continues to improve and how we could show, if we do help 50%, but then other people are becoming unhoused, how do we show that metric along with it so that success is shown, but also shown that more is needed? That's completely understandable. And of course, just you know, out loud, thank you from the council to Kelsey Knockett, being part of your team. And, you know, we miss her. I'm really thrilled that you are all here today. And that's all I will say for now, because it is very late, and I think you got it from all the things that we're saying. So thank you so much, and just really looking forward to where we go from here. I think all the questions were all the focus questions were answered. Do you need anything else?
No, I think we have great feedback. Thank you very much.
More than needed, probably. But well, thank you so much for all of your time. We have now liaison reports and communications. In our last meeting, we didn't get to say, Councilmember Francis, myself, and Councilmember Shorsman, we all went to the new League of Cities, new city council members and new mayors conference. And also going back to the homelessness for a minute, I'm looking forward to the city League of Cities will be meeting with the CSAC hopefully in April for their league days to advocate to the state. So again, another collaborative opportunity coming up soon. Any liaison reports or communication from any of my colleagues? Vice Mayor Marks.
Thank you. On the Integrated Waste Management Authority front, tomorrow there is a tour of the Cold Canyon landfill. If people are interested, just meet across the street on Osos at the IWMA headquarters at 1:30. The board and the staff of the IWMA are going to be all going in a bus, and it's a small bus. So people, the general public cannot be provided with transportation, but if you're there at 1:30, you can hear from Peter Cron what the game plan is out there at Cold Mountain. The field trip's going to last until probably about 4:30, so it's quite a time commitment. But this is a new board, and it's we're starting out with having experiences, not just meetings. So I think that's going to be fun. I also wanted to mention that I did attend with Jana, forgetting her, what's her last name? Nichols. With what she and Five Cities Coalition are doing down there in Grover for the pallet housing, temporary housing experiment. I thought it was quite interesting, and I'm curious to see if that's something that we might want to pursue in the future. That's all I have for now. Thanks.
Thank you. I look forward to doing that tour with Jana at some point. Councilmember Pease.
Thank you. I did participate in the Cal Cities Environmental Quality quarterly meeting, and so that legislation is coming forward. So a bunch of different things that were focused on water resiliency, energy and utilities, thinking about renewable energy and the CPUC to a certain extent, waste and recycling. So those are priorities coming forward, but if anybody has specific issues, legislation that you think would fit into environmental quality, let me know, because those can come up. And for the Water Resources Advisory Committee, RAC, we had a meeting last week. We talked to each of the jurisdictions, shared about their flooding and storm experiences. So it was good to be able to connect with each other and get kind of the straight scoop. But also county staff is working on the low impact development, LID, for stormwater management manual. They're doing a major update. So if anybody has concerns and wants to get involved, that's being led at the county effort.
Thank you. Councilmember Shorsman.
Yeah, mine's more of an announcement than a liaison report, but I just wanted to take one last opportunity because we won't have another meeting before the Disaster Recovery Center at the Vets Hall. The speaker tonight from the SBA talked about that location at the Vets Hall where people can go if they have had storm-related losses. That center closes on February 14th. Of course, you can still apply on disasterassistance.org, but the in-person location won't be available after February 14th. So if people are wanting to do that kind of, seek that kind of assistance in person, they should do it soon.
Thank you. And then I'll just tell you all that I had the Cal Cities African American Caucus board meeting on Monday. Had a lot of conversations around all the caucuses and how we can be a little bit more consistent along all the caucuses throughout the Cal Cities. So looking forward to seeing what that looks like. Shared a lot around Black History Month and what we're all doing, and some potential funding and challenges with taking funding for sponsorships as a 501c4. So dealing with those little challenges. So looking forward to what the Cal Cities workshops will be. Keep your eye out. Dave Molinak will be putting out emails, and housing and homelessness and Parks and Rec and all the issues you can possibly think of will be coming up as training sessions soon. So thank you, and just want to say that we will all be meeting back on Saturday, February 11th at 9 a.m. We'll be right here, and then we have a couple more meetings coming up also. We'll have a special closed session on Wednesday, February 15th at 5:30 p.m. once again here. And lastly, on February 21st, we'll come back to our normal city council meeting at 5:30 p.m. here in the chambers. Thank you so much and have a great night.